Welcome to Technology Brothers, the most profitable podcast in the world. Today, we are breaking down Ross Ulbricht. He was released from prison because he was pardoned by Donald Trump. We will give you the full deep dive on his life and career and the drug marketplace he built called the Silk Road.
Sharing economy startup.
Yeah.
Another way you could put it that way.
Yeah, exactly. Tons to learn from him, tons to, avoid. Mainly all the crimes.
Mistakes were made.
But that should be a fun one. We're going to take you through Ross Ulbricht, get you up to speed on that because he's out in the wild now.
Yeah.
He could do anything.
Yeah.
I think the pardon means
we weren't involved with the rumor.
Yeah.
But
there had nothing to do with it.
There may have been a rumor or some misinformation shared about him, potentially outraising, but it's just a rumor.
Yeah. And so
just a rumor.
Also in economy news or Fed world, the Fed.
We love the economy here.
We love the economy. We love business. The Fed had a meeting today. People were hoping for
a rate cut,
ideally to zero.
We had the DOM ready.
We had the DOM ready.
We picked it up this morning in preparation for a celebratory moment.
Yep.
And I feel a little bit rugged by Powell, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think the market was pricing in a cut.
I know,
but it didn't happen. But there were also rumors. There were rumors that Trump was saying
sounds
it should
smart,
go.
optimists, get paid.
Get rich, yeah. Well, maybe next time, but I'm sure there will be a reason to break out the Dom Perignon soon. So enjoy.
Leave it on the table. It might be this episode.
Maybe.
You never know.
Yeah. Surprise.
Trump might override it, send out a post. Hey, talk to Powell. We fixed the issue. We're going down to 2%.
I love that.
That would help us recover from Monday's
bloodbath. It's terrible. Well, let's go to SpaceX news. Starlink is coming to iPhones. They're teaming up with Apple and T-Mobile. There's an article in Bloomberg from Mark Gurman, guy who covers Apple better than anybody in the game. And he says Apple has been secretly working with SpaceX and T-Mobile to add support for the Starlink network in its latest iPhone software, providing an alternative to the company's in-house satellite communication service, which I don't know if you've used it. It's simultaneously amazing and absolutely terrible.
T-Mobile?
No, the satellite internet on your phone.
Oh, yeah.
Like if you get caught with no connection during the fires. Yeah.
So you have to go outside.
And you're like, it's amazing. It still works, but it's so slow, and
you can
only send a few text messages.
Like text-based messages.
It's like being on
a plane.
I don't know, like 1997.
It's like being on the phone. Like planes now, they offer the free messaging product, and then they have the paid version.
And they all kind of
messaging,
suck.
And it's like, okay, well, you can't receive images, but you can send text back and forth.
And so they've been testing iPhones with Starlink service in an under the radar move. The smartphone's latest software update released Monday now supports the technology. The tie-up comes as a surprise. T-Mobile had...
So that's interesting. I didn't realize they fully had the tech. It was just the
hardware
software.
Yeah,
update.
Just the software.
Yeah.
T-Mobile has previously only specified Starlink as an option for Samsung phones, such as the Z Fold and S24 models. Don't want to get caught using.
Do we have any listener? Android?
Yes, we do. We have one.
Wait, one?
Lone Ranger.
The Lone Ranger.
I'm pretty sure.
Oh, yeah.
I'm pretty sure. He said that.
Shout out to the Lone Ranger.
In a post on X responding to the news, Musk said images, music, and podcasts should be supported by current Starlink technology, and future upgrades will add video support as well. So it does seem like
bull market
when you
for daily podcasts.
Yes, fantastic. You'll be able to listen to this anywhere. I mean, there are some like restrictions because you have to be able to see the sky. You can't really use the satellite receiver inside. And then also, if you just look at the size of the Starlink dish that I have the mini, and that gets pretty good speeds, but they make a bigger one. As you scale that down, it does seem like you're scaling down the bandwidth, and there's some sort of power law function there. An Apple spokesperson declined to comment, while T-Mobile said the test.
Yeah, Mark is really just throwing this news out there without.
He has so many moles and sources inside Apple.
Clearly, they weren't exactly ready to announce all of this, but
he knows it. But
Elon's
text
no
messages
stranger
are already
to
going
it.
out.
He just reacts.
Yes. Text messages are already going out from T-Mobile saying, you're in the T-Mobile Starlink beta. You can now stay connected with texting via satellite from virtually anywhere. So I think Apple...
It's interesting, too, because I never followed this closely, but I always imagined that Starlink would eventually come out with their own phone plan and actually threaten the telecom providers.
Yep.
But maybe the telecom companies just find a way, to really
I mean, I think it really comes
cell
down
phone
to
is tied to service still.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to like
reliability.
And using it in buildings. Like you'd be like, why would you pay for that plan if it doesn't work in a building? That'd be weird. And then I guess they could team up and kind of like white label, like like Mint Mobile, that Ryan Reynolds company.
Yeah.
Like they don't have their own towers. They piggyback they roam on the other towers, and so I'm sure there's some way to build something, but Apple was originally working with Globalstar to offer satellite features in 2022. There's been speculation over whether it might support competing networks. The day after Apple's 2022 announcement, Musk posted on X that his company had some promising conversations with Apple about Starlink connectivity. It's so funny how he just like rips like these private conversations on X. He's just like, oh yeah, I just walked out of Apple. Like we're definitely getting a deal done. Like like, it's in the bag.
Do not do that if you're not Elon Musk.
yeah, exactly. So when a T-Mobile phone is in an area without cellular connectivity, devices that are part of the Starlink program will first try to pair with Starlink satellites. Users will also be able to activate texting via the satellite menu for the Globalstar service or contact emergency services through Apple. The initial version of Starlink is exclusively for testing, but Starlink and with SpaceX and T-Mobile have said that they plan to expand into data connections and voice calls in the future. The program is also only available in the US for now, and that contrasts with Apple's Globalstar service, which works in several countries.
So when I am getting the opportunity to use satellite on my iPhone, it's still Globalstar.
Yes, exactly.
And so Globalstar shares fell because people are thinking, okay, they clearly aren't on the level of Starlink, and Elon's going to make a bunch of deals happen that directly threaten their business.
Yeah, and so the history of like satellite communications for cell phone and internet, that's been going on for 30, 40 years.
It's also crazy. Think of the cost structure for Starlink because they own the rockets versus Globalstar, who presumably has to use SpaceX to get their satellites up. That's not a great competitive dynamic for Globalstars.
Yeah, a lot of this started with the guy who built he owns Madison Square Garden. He built the Sphere in Las Vegas, James Dolan. So James Dolan at one point was working with Madison Square Garden on like all their sports and entertainment thing. And he had a satellite TV startup that that he was like obsessed with. He was beefing with his dad about it. It was this crazy story. They wind up selling it, I think, to Dish Networks. And Dish is the traditional like satellite TV provider. So you put the satellite dish on your roof, and then you're getting a constant stream of TV. So it's not two-way communication. It's not bespoke. So that satellite, all it has to do is just say, okay, there's 100 channels of data. I just got to send those out to everyone all the time.
Yeah.
Whereas Starlink's much more complicated because it has to send you your, Instagram, your specific Instagram images.
When I'm using DeepSeek.
It has to send like your specific data, right? Internet's like more complicated. And so then there were satellite phones. And then Viasat was a company that was like really promising for a while, putting up big, like huge satellites.
Viasat still does a lot of stuff with the airlines, right?
Yep, exactly. And then Astronis is also doing geostationary satellite internet. So they will put one up over Alaska, and then that will just control just Alaska, but it's just one. Starlink has this mesh strategy, so they put up like thousands and thousands of them. And that's of course like driven by the fact that they have, all these rockets that are going up all the time. So they can afford to just put up tons. And then they're also in low Earth orbit as opposed to geostationary orbit. So they're, I think like, it's like 3,000 miles instead of 30,000 miles or something like that. So much closer to the Earth, and that enables lower latency. So instead of like you could sometimes with satellite internet or satellite TV, you could download like a big file, but there would be latency. So you could never do like a Zoom call or play a live game. And that's the advantage of Starlink. And so currently, if you're using an iPhone with Globalstar, you have to point your phone at the sky to find the satellite. Whereas with Starlink, it's designed to work automatically, even when the phone is in a customer's pocket, so maybe it'll work inside to some degree. I'm not exactly sure. But both the Starlink and Apple satellites features are designed to work in off-the-grid areas such as hiking trails that don't have cellular service. The capabilities can't be used in places where mobile phone where a mobile phone network is within reach. So it will just say, okay, we're not even bothering with the satellites if you're connecting to a cell phone tower. And the support for the Apple feature is available on most current iPhone models, and the company plans to bring it to its Ultra smartwatch later this year. That's cool. So like if you go hiking, you just bring your watch. You don't even need the phone. If something happens, you see a bear, you can still send a text message saying, come rescue me.
Glock's coming out.
Yeah. Maybe you don't need the Starlink connected Apple Watch. You just need the Glock. T-Mobile updated its website this week. SpaceX requested authority to begin beta testing the service starting Monday. The FCC Commission granted SpaceX conditional approval for its satellites to supplement T-Mobile's cellular network in November. So very exciting to see more Starlink news, more Starlink rolling out. Just
turns out owning the heavens, as SpaceX does, is quite valuable.
It's free real estate.
You can do a lot of stuff with it.
Yeah. There's a lot of alpha in that. I mean, that's the whole like mega bull thesis on the Boring Company is just like there's only so much land under the earth, and like if you can justify a way to like own it, like that's extremely valuable.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah, and we've talked before about land yachts and Beanairs. Beanairs looking to develop large drills attached to vehicles that allow them to burrow deep beneath the earth and sort of pop up in Saint Tropez, Courchevel, Aspen, Art Basel. You know, like being able to just pop up is a great feature and something that is in high demand.
Fantastic. Well,
should we talk a little bit about
AI?
We love talking about organic intelligence and artificial intelligence. Today we have an article here. I wanted to cover some news on OpenAI. For those that don't know, this is an American company that competes with a Chinese company called DeepSeek. Do you want to?
Yeah, people call it like the American DeepSeek, basically.
Yeah, it's the American DeepSeek.
It's the American DeepSeek.
Very similar to ChatGPT, except it struggles to talk about Tiananmen Square.
Yeah.
So.
But of course, if you've been listening to the show, you've seen, you've heard many deep dives. We've probably spent 3 hours talking about DeepSeek at this point. But Ben Thompson dropped a new update on Stratechery, and we're going to go through it. So to review his conclusion on OpenAI, he has some criticism of the company, specifically around speed of innovation, which is interesting. And his thesis is basically like, all the crazy nonprofit, effective altruism, all the fear mongering around AI doomerism, that really held us back. And this is what we get for that. Yeah. Meanwhile, like no one is causing an AI panic over DeepSeek. People are like, oh, cool, they use floating point 8 instead of FP32. Like, it's like, oh, it's so much more efficient. Like it's going to be able to, like review my, homework faster. Yeah. And that's it. It's not like, everyone's saying it's an incredible jump. No one's saying it's more dangerous now. Yeah. And that's just a complete vibe shift from 2 years ago when everything was, I was reading my son, The Boy Who Cried Wolf, and nothing like the AI doomers really need to read that story because they've been like GPT-1, this is going to kill us all. GPT-2, we're done for. GPT-3, it's completely over. It's never been more over. And now we're getting a new AI model every couple months. It's like, it could kill me, but I'm not going to listen to you.
Now people widely agree that we have AGI.
Yeah.
And it's ASI that we need, artificial superintelligence.
Yeah.
So the goalposts keep moving.
And so let's read from Ben's previous day conclusion. He says, that leaves America in a choice we have to make. We could, for very logical reasons, double down on defensive measures like massively expanding the chip ban and imposing a permission-based regulatory regime on chips and semiconductor equipment that mirrors the EU's approach to tech. Alternatively, we could realize that we have real competition and actually give ourselves permission to compete. Stop wringing our hands, stop campaigning for regulations. Indeed, go the other way and cut out all the cruft in our companies that has nothing to do with winning. If we choose to compete, we can still win. And if we do, we will have a Chinese company to thank. Yep. And I like that because he's just so focused on just like go, like competition. And just actually win there. So some folks read this as being simply about government regulations. And I did specifically mention the President Biden executive order on AI, which Trump has already repealed, but that misses the deeper point I was diving at. One of these intense frustrations of the last few years of the AI debate has been the Mott and Bailey aspect of the safety question. And this is funny because there's this AI doomer guy on X who always uses the Mott and Bailey like meme whenever someone's arguing with him. He's like, no, that's the Mott and Bailey. And now Ben Thompson's kind of like flipping it around. And so we'll break down like what that is, because it's actually kind of odd. But I understand and grant the very real concerns about AI safety, which I think everyone does. There is some safety concerns, but that's the Mott in the safety argument. But the way that AI safety has too often manifested has been through the imposition of various cultural mores that roughly align with San Francisco politics.
Ouch.
That's the Bailey. Indeed, if you look again at the excerpt from OpenAI's GPT-2 announcement that I linked to yesterday, it's right there in the first sentence. Due to concerns about large language models being used to generate deceptive, biased, or abusive language at scale, we are only releasing a much smaller version of GPT-2 along with sampling code. We are not releasing the dataset training code or GPT-2 model weights. So this is the moment that OpenAI decided to stop open sourcing everything.
Yep.
And the reason was we believe that our release strategy limits the initial set of organizations who may choose to do this and gives the AI community more time to have a discussion about the implications. So they were worried about generating deceptive, biased, or abusive language. So and then Ben says, first off, deceptive, biased, or abusive language is not a human extinction level danger. Yeah. So you've said, hey, we got to lock this down because it's going to paperclip us.
And then historically, we've dealt with bots trying to influence public opinion at scale. Yeah, they're not. Are we good, Ben?
Cool.
Cut for a second. Historically, it hasn't been this intelligent bot who's having a conversation. It's more these bots that are spamming comments being like, I think America's bad.
Yeah. It's literally just copy pasting.
That's deceptive and biased.
Totally.
And, doing the same things. I think one thing that OpenAI has always balanced is clearly they want to win.
Yeah.
Sam enjoys the competition but loves winning.
Mm-hmm.
He even said on television, I think about a year ago at this point, nobody could ever compete with us. Like he's on the record being, saying
I don't know
nobody is. I saw it was shown on like Entertainment Tonight, like some random television, but it was from some event he was at. So he said nobody can compete with us. That's obviously not true. They also have used this pending, looming doom. We're creating this all-power intelligence as a marketing and capital raising strategy to basically create this aura around the company of we are creating
the most
super
powerful
intelligence.
thing.
We're creating this powerful being that's more powerful than humanity, and you have to trust us to control it. So historically, I think some of this stuff, due to concerns about large language models playing into that. That narrative, but then also saying, well, we have the power.
Yeah. I do wonder, like there are so many different people around the table. Like a lot of this language was clearly driven by the previous OpenAI administration, essentially, like the nonprofit board. Like some of those people were really, really crazy. And it for a while it felt like, even though Eliezer Yudikowsky wasn't tied to OpenAI, it felt like he was almost like an informal
the puppet master.
It felt like he was like an informal spokesperson for a while. And now it's like he's completely out of the picture. But it was like, oh, if Eliezer says something, like OpenAI is going to have to respond because like it's really critical that we like take him seriously. And now it's been kind of, we've moved past that. And so second, who decides what is deceptive, biased, or abusive? And third, whatever your position on these questions, I think we can all agree that a tremendous amount of time and effort has been devoted to arguing about these cultural war issues and implementing one side or the other of them. And by definition, that time has an opportunity cost. More broadly, I think it is completely valid to argue that a lot of time and energy in tech has been devoted to many things other than actual tech. And that's the justification for that lack of focus has been rooted.
I would actually be interested how many tens of millions or potentially hundreds of millions of dollars are spent on their safety team annually. Like it could easily be somewhere in the range of $50 to $100 million that's just being spent on people that are a part of the safety apparatus, which Ben is basically putting in the culture war bucket.
Yeah.
Like almost classifying them as making them like a DEI org.
Yeah, what's interesting is like, so he goes on to talk about the O1 chain of thought and how when they launched O1, in comparison to R1 tells you everything it's thinking and just dumps it out. And it's open source. So even if it didn't, you could still see every single token that it's thinking about. And that's turned out to be a great UI pattern. We've talked about this. It's like, it's just really reassuring to the user. But when OpenAI launched O1, they said they believe that a hidden chain of thought presents a unique opportunity for monitoring models. Assuming it's faithful and legible, the hidden chain of thought allows us to read the mind of the model and understand its thought process. And this was the thing where I went to O1, asked it to summarize a book, and one of the hidden chain of thought sections was copyright infringement. So it thought internally about like, is it okay for me to share the contents of this book?
Cool.
And it decided yes. And so there's
a little bit of a bad boy, like
there's that
Ross.
Yeah. And then there's also the fact that so they were also thinking about hiding the chain of thought so that people couldn't steal it and use it to train their model, basically. And if they have some interesting thing in there, they can kind of tuck that behind the scenes and just give you a better answer. But this exposed chain of thought from R1 has clearly won out on the day, and I think we'll see other models shipped. Yeah, users like it.
That was the only UI change that people cared about or talked about with the DeepSeek launch was that exposed chain of thought.
Everything was either a copy, like even just the fact that you have like the chats on the side, like where the buttons are laid out is a verbatim copy of ChatGPT.
Yeah,
many
down
of the features
the API,
are
the way the API works.
Many of them are actually degraded features. Like you can't click a button just to talk to it. There's no voice mode at all. It doesn't have a lot of features yet. But exposed chain of thought is like the fundamental UI pattern breakthrough. And so exposed chain of thought teaches users how to do better prompting because they can see exactly where the AI gets confused. It increases trust in the model because you gain an understanding of how it's arriving at the answer. And it's just cool and endearing. One thing that was interesting with the normie discovery of R1 is how delightful they found the experience. And so Ben understands OpenAI's competitive concerns, but the existence of R1 has shown that locking down chain of thought perhaps didn't matter so much. More generally, the consideration of competitive concerns gets back to my overall critique that the U.S. approach to competition is too rooted in stopping and blocking would-be competitors instead of out-innovating them.
Yeah.
And this was the thing where, like, remember when we went back to that Ilya working on A-Star, and the framing around that was absolute panic. I remember there were fake news articles about OpenAI. This was almost 2 years ago, we said, right? It was a year and a half ago, or maybe a year and 3 months ago. And they said, A-Star is so good, it solved every foundational like math problem, and it also broke encryption.
Yeah.
And so they were like, they have an AI model that can break encryption. So they're just going to like, Bitcoin should go to zero because they've broken encryption. And it was like obviously not true, but people were just so insane about it. And internally, it seemed like a lot of people were maybe just using it for internal politics and like, oh, is this dangerous? Like, why are we moving so fast? The nonprofit folks having a big problem with it. And then O1 just throws it, or R1 just comes out and throws it out there. And it's like, yeah, it's basically fine.
Yeah.
Very funny.
Yeah, it's kind of the most savage founders that I know will, when they're fundraising, they'll take a PDF export of their deck and they'll share it with anybody that's like remotely like interested in what they're doing or relevant in some way. And then the founders that are sort of afraid of competition, kind of lock their decks down. They put emails, authentication and passwords on their deck, and then they usually end up just like not being the actual like winner in the category. Yeah. And so it's the same thing here where we should just be really focused on
innovation,
winning, innovation, being at the edge, understanding that people are going to reverse engineer everything good that gets done in the world. That's been the case for every technology, and things will get copied one way or another.
And this was kind of the weird critique that I saw once the Sam Altman like haters got really emboldened. They would make the claim that Sam Altman is like non-technical and has never done anything good and is not responsible for any innovation in AI. Like the transformer was invented at Google. He didn't invent the transformer. He just like popularized it. But then simultaneously they'll argue that they'll quote the OpenAI board that criticized Sam for launching ChatGPT too quickly without informing the board. Do you remember this whole thing? It was like as evidence of Sam like moving recklessly with regard to AI safety. He just just tweeted out ChatGPT one day. And it's like, well, which is it? Like he
Yeah.
can't be both. He can't both have no impact and also create the most dominant product and drive it forward and actually get it out in the
if
world.
You're thinking about OpenAI as a business, him tweeting it out and getting to 100 million users in however was it weeks.
It's fantastic.
It's clearly was the right decision to just go.
Yeah.
If you're thinking about it from a nonprofit safety org lens, you should
Totally.
have waited a year. You should have tested more.
Yeah.
Should have put more guardrails up. You should have rolled it out slowly. There's a number of things that.
Yeah. And so I kind of see it as like there is a world where Sam was fighting like an internal or like the nonprofit culture war, like a longhouse type environment that was saying like, no, don't release products, don't move fast, don't innovate, don't do anything that could be risky because they're so terrified of what they're building.
Yeah.
And he's looking at it and he's like, actually, this is fine as a chatbot. Let's just get it out there and see what happens. Yeah. And that was the right decision. But there's still that impulse internally to say, hey, maybe we should lock this down a little bit more. And so there's an interesting discussion right now. Is this a Sputnik moment or a Google moment? And so Ishan Wong, who is, I think, the CEO of Reddit, says, Sputnik showed that the Soviets could do something the U.S. couldn't. A new fearsome power. They didn't subsequently publish all the technical details in half the blueprints. They only showed that it could be done. With DeepSeek, if I recall correctly, a lab in Berkeley read their paper and duplicated the claimed results on a small scale within a day. That's why I say this is like the Google moment in 2004. Google filed its S1 in 2004 and revealed to the world that they had built the largest supercomputer cluster by using distributed algorithms to network together commodity computers at the best performance per dollar on the cost curve. And famously, Google's was massively profitable when they went public, and every VC is like, why can't we have more Googles? Because the financials were so fantastic. This was in contrast to every other tech company of the day during the dot-com boom, who at that point just bought what were essentially larger and larger mainframes, always at the most expensive leading edge of the cost curve. And so Ben says it's hard to overstate what a favor DeepSeek did to basically everyone by open sourcing their model and explaining exactly how they accomplished what they did. They could have, and from a geopolitical perspective, arguably should have kept all their progress a secret, even as China built drastically more efficient AI infrastructure.
You know the narrative that they are a hedge fund, this was a side project, and so they just released it short, opened a massive short against
That's
NVIDIA,
a funny one,
and then made, they could have made how many tens of billions of dollars off of that short, right?
There are so many theories here.
Like, it is a fun theory.
Yeah.
And there is a world where that was exactly the strategy, is like they were building models internally to run their investing. And then they realized, hey, we can train a model and we can throw up a clone of ChatGPT.
Yep.
And if we pay to get it #1 in the App Store, we can tank the markets on Monday and make like an entire career's worth of
it's definitely a tinfoil hat theory, but but I'm interested. I'm listening. I'm listening.
I'm not saying
totally.
I'm not saying it.
I mean, Palmer just cited that in a post that we'll go through later, and it's not as crazy as it sounds. There were some people pushing back, and he had some very good responses to those things.
Yeah.
So then he moves to a tweet from Rune, who says, "This is not the right lesson. There is an opportunity cost to researcher time, and if they're spending it micro optimizing PTX to make the best of limited comms, like the memory communication bandwidth, that's something else they weren't doing. Nerfing some aspect of the hardware is never a benefit. The most dangerous," and then Ben says, "The most dangerous lure about thinking in terms of comparative advantage is how time and learning curves lead you to consequences that you never considered when you made the decision. I wrote about this exactly last year in A Chance to Build. I started the post by describing how U.S. semiconductor companies kicked off outsourcing to Asia and tied that to the fact that Apple can't make an iPhone in the U.S. And so Steve Jobs famously said, it's not even a matter of price. It's just there are not 30,000 manufacturing engineers in the United States. There are not 30,000 manufacturing engineering jobs to be filled. This is because the structure of the world economy, choices made starting with Bretton Woods in particular and cemented by the removal of tariffs over time, made them non-viable. And so connect this to Google. What if Google had taken Rune's advice and not wasted the time of valuable researchers in transforming how data centers are built? Perhaps they could have waited until Alibaba did it a decade later and rented capacity. And in the meantime, they would have been a far smaller and less significant company specifically, and the entire US tech industry would have been similarly stunted generally. To be fair to Rune, he does seem to be talking narrowly about the specific optimizations that DeepSeek made to overcome the H800's nerfed memory bandwidth, but I think the critique holds more generally. US tech companies, including OpenAI, have clearly, in retrospect, been NVIDIA's willing suckers, happy to pay for more capacity instead of wringing out their own. How many years would it have taken them to discover DeepSeek breakthroughs?
This is a classic. If you're trying to scale anything really quickly, do anything really fast, you just end up paying more for it. So you hire somebody and you just say, yeah, we'll pay you, $20,000 a year more than we budgeted for the role because we need the role. Or you're trying to buy billboards quickly and you say, yeah, we're going to pay 30% premium, but we want to launch this now because there's this competitive pressure. So what these U.S. firms have been doing is not exactly out of the ordinary. It's just the nature of trying to do things fast as you just focus on speed versus efficiency and cost.
Yep. And so he closes talking about aggregation theory, says, on the flip side, non-reasoning LLMs are still great at producing content, and they also get smaller by distilling the output of reasoning models. One of the big R1 takeaways is that you can infuse reasoning into normal LLMs. More than that, though, you can also use them to generate massive amounts of synthetic data that simply teach the normal LLMs the answer to an effectively infinite number of questions. And of course, reasoning could end up simply being effectively free. One announcement that I should have added to yesterday's post was Google's announcement of Gemini 2.0 flash thinking, that it appears to be competitive with R1. The China is crushing US rhetoric today forgets about Gemini 2.0 flash thinking, likely cheaper, longer context, and better on reasoning. We're still early in the AI race. So this was like completely missed.
Yeah.
But we don't know the prices yet.
Can you believe that Google owns search and YouTube and they basically have every mainstream media company by the balls, and they can't even get news out on a week?
It is crazy. Their product sense is just so bad, and they have this whole problem.
And their marketing sense now.
It's like, is it Gemini or is it Bard? Or they've been renaming models left and right, and it's clearly they're shipping their org chart because they had Google Brain and then DeepMind, and they finally merged them, but they're still just like I know what Google is. Google is a search engine. I know what ChatGPT is. ChatGPT is a chatbot.
Yeah.
Like Google Gemini 2.0 flash thinking, how do I even access that? I tried to get Gemini set up. I finally figured it out.
Sounds like an internal project.
I went to Gemini and then I had to upgrade to Gemini Advanced, and then I got access to the 1.5 model, but I was even asking the model, what are your capabilities? And it didn't know. It was not telling me how to do it.
That should be one of a new benchmark for models. You should be able to.
What's your context window? What version am I on? How do I upgrade?
You're
take my money.
Interviewing for a role and somebody asks, so what are you good at? What do you do? And you don't have a good answer for it. That's kind of a tough sell.
Yeah. And so Google is a company that actually cares about and has invested in infrastructure and perhaps doesn't see the need for software type of margins OpenAI and Anthropic have allegedly been earning on their API. So I wouldn't be surprised if they are very competitive. Of course, they're not open source, but again, R1 is I can get all the thinking I want locally for free. This isn't necessarily dispositive in terms of the long-term prospects for aggregation theory, but given that the entire history of technology has been defined by processing speed simultaneously increasing, even as it decreases in price, the burden of proof is probably on those who say that zero marginal costs are an aberration. And so he's saying that in the long term, all of these models will be optimized to the point where they're zero marginal cost. Yeah. And at that point, being the entry point and being able to tax that is really valuable. And so there's a couple posts that we'll go into during the timeline that say, oh, this is massively bullish for Apple because all of a sudden the inference gets super cheap, gets much better, can be done on the edge, baked down. They don't need to mess around with any of the actual training or inference themselves. They can just throw it on the phone and it's there and it's great.
Yeah.
And same with Google and Facebook. They're saying it's really good for Facebook because they can just chuck this in and they don't need to worry about, playing the model race.
Yeah.
But fascinating story. It continues to evolve.
Ben
Stay
Thompson
tuned.
Staying competitive.
Goated.
Goated.
Let's move on to Ross Ulbricht and the story of the Silk Road.
We've had a lot of laughs. Obviously, it's a dark story in many ways.
Yep.
There's sort of this bright spot now with him being pardoned. We'll wait till the end to talk about whether or not we agree with that decision. Not that it's on our, not that we like to comment on politics.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's so many just insane aspects of this story.
Yeah.
And I think that as we looked into it, we realized that so many people had talked about the history and the sort of crime story around Silk Road because it's so fascinating. It's this internet narco trafficker meets hacker meets Anon who, was an Eagle Scout, right? So it's just like wild story.
Yeah,
and an amazing marketer.
Oh, yeah.
Even after getting caught.
Even after, he still has a ton of fans. I don't know if Ben, you can pull this photo up, but he was an Eagle Scout. I was an Eagle Scout.
Did you
know that? Yeah.
I didn't know that. My dad was an Eagle Scout.
And I remember when I was in the Boy Scouts, they would tell everyone, no Eagle Scout has ever been convicted of a felony. Or something like that. And it was like clearly wrong, but it was just to like put you in the mindset of like, well, I don't want to be the first one, so I can't be a criminal.
Yeah.
And it was very effective.
The Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts fell off massively.
There are tons of like culture war issues there.
Yeah. And real,
like,
issues around
criminal
sex
stuff.
crimes and stuff like that. But anyway,
but he has a lot of fans, and
dude.
Dripped Out Technology Brothers like really, really likes him and has posted him multiple times. There's another photo of him. We'll put that up on the screen of him. And
without a doubt, he's benefited massively from his
aesthetics.
Yeah,
and, the physiognomy is strong.
Which is why it's underpriced to get diced.
I don't know that he's diced. I don't know that he's actually lifting.
But a lot of people say he looks healthier than
healthy.
Brian Johnson. After 11 years in prison, eating prison slop.
Yeah. What's the secret?
What's the secret?
Yeah.
We'll have to ask him.
He does look young, and he's certainly played into that, and we'll go into kind of the timeline here, because a lot of people think, he was 17 when he did this. Wrong.
The other aspect that we'll talk about throughout the story is how good of a marketer he was. And he and his family, post-incarceration, on his carceral journey, they were able to spin this story like he was like some 18-year-old kid, a high schooler almost. What you'll find out is that he was, 11 years ago, when he was put into prison, he was 29 years old.
Yeah.
So he wasn't a kid.
No,
right?
not at all. He was born in 1984.
And he was very aware of his actions. So just to get into kind of like the high level founder mode elements of the story, and then we'll get into the timeline. He's a self-taught developer, first-time CEO, completely bootstrapped the company, went from 0 to 1.2 billion in sales in less than 3 years, personally netted over 80 million in fees off the marketplace with a very low take rate, which we'll also get into, operating a fully remote, global, and basically anonymous team where he was the only one that knew the real identity of his employees. He would require them to show ID, leveraged novel payment rails using Bitcoin, and maintain this sort of missionary sort of mode to building the company that was basically almost like a religious pursuit for him because of his libertarian beliefs, which we'll also get into. So
the backbone of our research was mostly Nick Bilton's American Kingpin, which is a great book. I highly recommend it. It reads like, it's a page turner. It's like a total thriller. Bilton kicks it off by taking you back to the beginning of Ross Ulbricht's story. Born in Austin, Texas, March 27th, 1984. Supportive middle-class household, nothing crazy going on. Eagle Scout, as we mentioned. Friends and family described him as polite, gentile, and unassuming. Ulbricht developed an interest in science, tinkering with computers. He goes to University of Texas at Dallas on scholarship, initially studying physics. Then he pursues a master's degree in material science at Penn State. And he basically gets obsessed with libertarian economic theory, especially Ludwig von Mises, Murray Rothbard, and Milton Friedman.
Yeah, and so while he's there, so one thing to note, he's not studying computer science. He's not a programmer at all at this point. He's interested in technology, but he's spending his time going and debating libertarian beliefs, arguing for things like the legalization of drugs. His big point, the high level his high level view is that the government should not have any decision making power over individuals, and individuals should be able to do whatever they want. And he goes on to do whatever he wants. Basically.
Have you seen that post? It should go on Banger Archive, but it's like women will say they want a man who reads, but every man who reads ascribes to some scaring extremist political belief. And it's like, he got into reading and started reading like Mises and Rothbard and like these like kind of crazy philosophers. And he really,
speaking of Ludwig von Mises, there's this UFC fighter Manny Moicano. He's done this post-fight speech where he just is like hammering against the government. Like,
and I mean, obviously, like there's a lot of good ideas in libertarianism, but it clearly, like Ross took it to such an extreme that he was using it to justify anything, and clearly bending his, like, libertarians love to, they have a hammer and everything looks like a nail. And so they wind up not seeing any externalities, just viewing every little minor interaction as like, oh, well, this fits with my libertarian ideology, so therefore it's justified.
Yeah.
And he really, really twisted the ideology in like a much more negative way than many libertarians who are just arguing for like slightly smaller government or like, slightly, lower taxes or something, or more efficiency in the government. Like you could look at Doge as like a libertarian project in some ways, but it's much different than, we should legalize guns and drugs and all this crazy stuff, which is like where he wound up. And so,
not just legalizing it, but brokering transactions at scale for a number of illicit goods.
He dabbled in entrepreneurial ventures after graduate school. One of these involved day trading. Another was an ebook enterprise. None proved lucrative or fulfilling.
So to be clear, he was trying to do day trading, realized it wasn't very profitable. He also he was a part of this someone else's sort of nonprofit called Good Wagon Books, which they would go around to houses, collect sort of old books that people didn't want. They would sell the ones online that they could, and then they would donate to prisons the ones that they couldn't sell.
Wow.
And so he was probably donating books to himself in his later years.
Setting himself up.
And one other thing about this time that I thought was interesting, while at Penn State, little like odd jobs he was working, he saved up enough to buy a rental house. And he later shared that he found it so frustrating having college students as degenerate college students as tenants that he sold it. And he actually used that money to kind of get Silk Road off the ground because he didn't have an income for some amount of time.
Yeah. So he becomes fascinated with Tor, the onion router, which is the portal to the dark web.
The timing here is so key, right?
Yeah,
Because
totally.
like if he had all these ideas 5 years before, tried to do it then, wouldn't have had Bitcoin.
Yep.
I don't know where Tor was in the development, but it wasn't. All this stuff was like this perfect convergence.
Totally. And Bitcoin obviously coming up at this time. Few people outside of cryptography circles were paying attention to Bitcoin, but Ross saw it as a tool for circumventing government oversight. He once famously stated, "I want to use economic theory as a means to abolish the use of coercion." This quote illustrates Ross's self-styled mission of empowering voluntary exchanges. And it's also very funny throughout this because he's not like super technical. There's a lot of times when clearly you can tell that he's bought, like, oh, nothing can go wrong. It's decentralized. Like, Bitcoin, it's anonymous. And it's like, it's actually not anonymous, like in many ways. And there's always ways around this stuff.
You don't have to,
but
what's
the
what's the word for it? You don't have to KYC.
Yeah.
But it's a public ledger.
Exactly. So it's very, very traceable. And we'll go into this later, but they're like tracking the Bitcoin movements actually got a lot more people caught because it was all trackable. And there's
still companies today like Chainalysis that leverage public blockchains to track down criminals at scale.
Yeah. And so combining Tor with Bitcoin and his ideological calling, he sets up the first version of the Silk Road. By early 2011, Silk Road was online, though still small, and his site allowed buyers and sellers to communicate, post product listing, and leave reviews. It was basically an eBay clone.
Yeah, and so just going back a little bit, taking one quick break. Sure. So he to anytime you're starting a marketplace. So the fact that he took this marketplace from 0 to 1.2 billion in volume in 3 years, bootstrapped, is insane. Like very, very, very few companies do that. In order to get this started, marketplaces have this chicken and egg problem where what comes first, the supply you need supply in order to have demand on the marketplace. And so he actually starts growing mushrooms in order to create the supply to have supply on the marketplace. So he's growing mushrooms, he's building the site, and then once he's at a point where he's ready, and he has a girlfriend at this time who's like, sounds like a very sweet girl, and they're very like in love at the time. And he at one point like takes his girlfriend like blindfolded out to like see the mushrooms, and like is like all proud of it, like takes her out to this like damp kind of field or whatever, and there's just, and so he's this is like the very beginning of him actually. So he had the intention to commit crimes, and he's very aware that it's what he's doing is illegal, and he specifically chose psilocybin mushrooms because he felt like the penalty for that would be less severe than starting by selling harder drugs. Heroin. Or even something like marijuana at the time,
but I thought the amount that he was growing it wasn't like he was growing like, oh, he's got like one little plant. It was like a whole room full, and the punishment for that, if he had gotten caught, would have been years and years in prison just for that. Which is like still kind of crazy.
And one thing is, in order to kind of kickstart the first initial sales, he went on a site that would talk a public forum that would talk about mushrooms, and he made a post. And he was very sort of, this was smart at the time if you weren't committing crimes, but he posted something under this username. I forget what the username was called.
Was it Altoid?
It was Altoid. And it was like, hey, has anybody tried this site?
Yeah, it looks pretty cool.
Looks cool. And he used that to sort of catalyze some traction because he knew he was holding supply that he was ready to sell. And so we'll get to this later, but that ended up being part of his downfall because he had used his real email to create the Altoid account. And he had gone back at one point and changed the email, but there was a record in the database that it had rossulbricht@gmail.com tied to that username. So that was one of the ways that they sort of ended up
he's one of those things where he's like, oh, everything's anonymized and decentralized. It's like, you left paper trail all over the place, bro. Like, you were not that good at your OPSEC. And so it's fascinating how fast this took off. So he's thinking about it in late 2010. In January of 2011, he launches the Silk Road, codenamed Underground Brokers, in Austin, Texas, aiming to create a free market website where users can buy anything anonymously. And by June, just 6 months later, Senator Chuck Schumer denounces Silk Road in Washington, D.C., prompting heightened media coverage that forces Ross to bolter.
They also got a big Gawker article, which I think was right around this time.
Yeah, this all happened right around the same time.
So a reporter who is at Gawker, and Gawker's no longer with us due to the actions of some powerful people in tech. But this Gawker article hears about Silk Road, gets on it, and is browsing around, ends up writing this whole piece. Ross talks to them and says, please don't write this piece. That usually doesn't work with journalists. They know they're onto something. They end up publishing this. And there was even a while that journalist was suspected of starting Silk Road because it was such a big marketing moment that people were like, did he just like
start this? That's
did
hilarious.
He like use this? And he'd written about some other topics.
There were
and
a
that
number,
was like Ross really felt like it was too early for it to go that public. Like they were starting to do sales in a meaningful way, but at the same time, he was a self-taught developer, and so he struggled with hacks and stuff like that all the time. And so he would notice every now and then, he'd be like, oh, what the heck? Like my wallet's getting drained. And so he'd be freaking out. The Bitcoin at the time, to be clear, we should look up on public what the actual price was, but it would be like, I'm sure it was like a few dollars.
It was a few dollars,
Bitcoin. And so he'd be noticing like, oh, my wallet's getting drained. It wasn't that damaging, but he kept having these sort of small errors because he was not a super sophisticated. He was like a hacker type builder, but not a security engineer. And so he kept constantly getting kind of lightly scammed. And so this launch, like you can imagine, he's just in Austin building this thing by himself. He had a couple engineers that would help him that knew they were committing crimes too, but they were on board with it. And then going 0 to 60 in 6 months, 0 to 100, 0 to 1,000, right? Like he's getting a senator in Washington, D.C. that's denouncing you. The pressure was on right away.
Usually these like, government federal level pressures take like years until like the first like, oh, is Facebook leading to misinformation that took like, years and years, or even like the Juul
probably
hearings.
Almost 10 years.
Yeah, the Juul hearings were probably, that company was started like 10 years before.
And it was being publicly marketed the whole time.
Yeah, totally.
Silk Road had the Gawker article and some other coverage, but it wasn't.
Yeah, Chuck Schumer had the Zyn press conference in 2024. Zyn launched in America 2014. And so the dark web, Amazon, the Silk Road really like just took off so fast, 6 months.
And to be clear, the reasons why it was in many ways a much better, looking purely at the user experience. So if somebody that's buying drugs in 2011, while this starts, they can go and find a dealer on the street or hit up some random sketchy person on Facebook. And there's all these ways to have a transaction that don't have a bunch of reviews, right? So you're kind of trusting the dealer, which is like people that sell drugs. I can imagine you wouldn't want to like trust them with your life. And so the experience at the time was from a purely like a product experience, to be able to go on a site to see vetted sellers that have a selling history and activity on the forum and reviews. He really made the experience of buying these narcotics much better. And people were allowed to buy very small amounts. And this ended up being what slowly helped get the marketplace taken down. Is usually authorities, so like Homeland Security, DEA, FBI, when they're tracking drugs, they're looking for these big shipments. And as Silk Road started taking off, they started getting these envelopes that would be, one little pill. So like one person who just like goes on there, they just order one. It's kind of cute. It's kind of cute. But yeah, it can't be understated. Like going back to the founder story bit, he made the experience, like he really innovated on the experience.
There's a couple other things that were pretty innovative here. They had an escrow system which used Bitcoin kind of smart contracts, but really just it would transfer the Bitcoin out of the buyer's account into a holding account, and then once the transaction cleared, it would get paid to the seller. And so like if you got scammed, you could actually have like a dispute resolution process.
It was like a PayPal type experience.
And PayPal really unlocked.
And to be
eBay.
Clear, so that it wasn't fully trustless, right?
No.
Like somebody
very
could have received it, centralized, and
we
Ross
saw that because everyone
was
was stealing Bitcoin from the site constantly.
Well, and Ross would also have to get involved with these disputes. And there was even situations where he'd be negotiating with cartels, saying, somebody would steal. And the cartels would get mad at him and be threatening him. So one thing to be clear, at every step of the way, he was doing things that didn't scale. And that involved committing crimes, basically. And so looking at, and just to compare this to another company like Airbnb that got launched out of this era, Airbnb innovated on the vacation rental because there were some marketplaces, but
Couchsurfing.
People would book a vacation rental without seeing any reviews, and then you show up there and it's like, well, the toilets don't work and the sheets are all dirty. It's a very, very similar experience. We're just opening it up and creating more trust, really catalyze some velocity.
And so as he's growing the site, he starts going by his pseudonym, the Dread Pirate Roberts, which is a
reference to the
Princess Bride. Which is like kind of an odd reference. I don't think of that as like particularly libertarian. It's just kind of like a funny, weird thing to pick. I guess he likes that movie. Really shows you how old he is, though, because that movie came out in like the 80s, right?
It's like a classic, though.
And
he went and he never went by Ross, to be clear. He went by admin.
Oh, okay.
And so going by Dread Pirate Roberts was a way to build this brand world around the site, right? It was this pirates themed kind of.
It's funny because there's another pirate themed, like decentralized, like the Pirate Bay. Are you familiar with this? It's like a BitTorrent, right? So like for downloading illegal movies and stuff, much less harmful, but still kind of similar piracy theme.
Pirates of the internet.
And so people start obsessing over this guy. They revere DPR as a benevolent philosopher king who is giving the world a safer alternative to street drugs. And people really believe the narrative of like harm reduction, that he, reduced the amount of violent crime, because anytime that there's a drug transaction on the street, there's a chance that it goes south and someone gets shot or stabbed or murdered or something like that. And that's not going to happen on the Silk Road. Now, the problem is that, well, if you're increasing the amount of drug dealing by 1,000x, even if they're 50% safer, well, there's still a net negative impact of that. Yeah. And you need to measure that. And so, sure, it's I'm sure a lot of cartels were like, cool, I'll just go on Silk Road, buy a bunch of stuff, and then deal it on the street. And so you just wind up with more street deals.
Yeah, and at this time, so this brand world building that he's doing, this is why if you view him purely as a founder and ignore the heinous crimes that he committed over a long period of time, he would do things like they would have a 420 sale, right? Where it was like whoever, if you bought on the site, you got like a ticket that entered you into something where you could win like an all expenses paid trip and stuff like that. So he was following the sort of like traditional e-commerce marketing
he's doing
method.
Black Friday, Cyber Monday is like huge for him. He's like, let's pump
and
it.
And he'd be like, no fees today on the platform. Buy as many drugs as you want. But meanwhile, the dark side of that is that people would be buying heroin and overdosing and killing. Like,
it's bad.
It was very to him. He had these libertarian ideals. Meanwhile, you're enabling addicts to, if you make it almost as easy to buy drugs as going on Amazon, you're enabling a lot of behavior that isn't so great.
And I mean, another factor of the growth was that Silk Road really drove early adoption of Bitcoin, and it created this crazy flywheel where you would buy a little bit of Bitcoin to go on Silk Road, buy some psilocybin mushrooms or something, and then because there was so much buying pressure, the price of Bitcoin would go up. You'd still have some left over in your wallet and be like, whoa, I made money, like I could buy more now, and then that would drive more people into it. And so it became this like virtuous cycle. And I remember reading about some journalists who had tested the site and bought like one drug pill or something when they were reporting on it, and then forgotten about what they left in their wallet. So they bought like, I needed to buy $100 of Bitcoin, and I spent 50 of it on the Silk Road back in 2010. And now it's like 500K or something. And then they have to find their keys, and some of them did, some of them lost it.
So the crazy thing about this is, so Ross in the very, very early days in 2011 had a girlfriend. She didn't agree with with what he was doing. And she basically gave him an ultimatum at one point, like me or Silk Road. He chose Silk Road, founder mode, absolute dog. So he goes with that. And then at one point, like later, he tells her they get together again at some point in San Francisco, and he tells her that I gave the site away, all this stuff. Her roommate also during this time found out about it. Because like they got in an argument, and she posted on his Facebook wall, like, I hope the authorities don't find out about Ross Ulbricht's drug website, and then like deleted it. He got her to delete it. And so he had a couple loose ends here. The other thing that's crazy about his experience doing this is so anybody who's built a company before, that it's the kind of thing that you're thinking about around the clock, right? You wake up at 3 a.m., you're thinking about it. Right as you're going to bed, you're telling your significant other about it, whatever. It's not something you can get off your mind, and it's a very uncomfortable thing to not be able to talk about it, because you have all these ideas, like, right, like we're in the gym, I'm like, I need to talk to you about this challenge, whatever. So Ross doesn't have any of that. He has his girlfriend at first, and then she's like, oh, wow, like my boyfriend is like a narco trafficker, like digital pirate, like this is crazy. So that ends. And then he starts to develop these friendships online, people that he's talking to, people that are users of the platform, people that are sellers. And so he starts developing these friendships. He's got a buddy that's in Vietnam. I forget.
He's really developing like two worlds, almost like a split personality thing. Like he
doesn't have that much of a IRL life.
It doesn't have much of an IRL life, and then he actually splits his computer hard drive in two and kind of has two wings of the computer, one for his personal life, one for the Dread Pirate Roberts, and it's almost like there's like he can switch to just being a completely different person, completely different moral framework, because even during the trial, a lot of the witness testimony, character witnesses were like, even during this period, like he was just totally normal guy. And it's like he was able to put on one face and then go online and then be chatting with people about like, oh yeah, let's kill this person and let's bring in 1 million pounds of meth.
Send me the photo when you finish the job, So and this whole time, so law enforcement already by this point has started to develop, like, use anonymous accounts to develop relationships with him. He already has law enforcement that are buying drugs on the platform to like build cases, and they're trying to, he has this guy, Duyegi, what's his name? Do you
I don't remember.
His name?
No.
So this is a random guy in Chicago who's with Homeland Security who's painstakingly collecting thousands of Silk Road orders, which he had figured out. Historically, apparently, people would send drugs in the mail and they'd have like these handwritten letters. So that was like one way you could potentially identify.
Sure.
But then people on Silk Road wanted to look like they were more professional.
So they
would print out these sort of like
mailing
the address,
labels,
mailing, return labels. And so there was this guy, Duyegi, I forget his name. And what's crazy is many of these law enforcement people themselves end up committing crimes as part of the process. And
it's
then
so
they get
chaotic.
taken. It's like the most chaotic story.
And I mean, there's just so many different organizations involved in this. The DEA, the FBI, the IRS, Homeland Security, the Secret Service, and then they all have varying levels of jurisdiction and abilities.
And they all want to win.
They all want to win.
And they all want credit for it.
They all want credit for it. And so it's just chaotic. Let's go through some of the posts just to kind of break it up. I have this one from Rune here who says, okay, but where are the crypto conferences for people building illegal stuff? I'm talking next generation impenetrable Silk Road, evading Chinese capital controls, war bonds. Hit me up. This was back in 2022 when crypto was obsessed with like NFTs and just kind of like
pre-FTX crash.
Yeah. I think this is pre-FTX, and so I mean, I think that we can obviously intellectually understand that like everything that happened here was terrible. It's a tragedy. It's like bad in so many ways. But it's deep down, I think if you don't recognize that, like, you know, crime stories are a little bit cool and like edgy, like that's just a very natural impulse. And I think that's what drew a lot of people to this story. And then, the whole reason that we're talking about this is this clip from Autism Capital that says, breaking, Trump confirms that if he becomes president, he will commute the sentence of Silk Road founder Ross Ulbricht. So this was in May of last year before. So the whole reason that we wound up in this situation is because there was this massive campaign that we'll get into, Free Ross, that was driven by his mother, and she'd been campaigning for him a long time.
And there were a lot of married.
Yeah.
At one point,
and she was working on the project, and then there were a lot of libertarians and a lot of Bitcoin people that were like, get him out. And so it became this like bargaining chip with Trump as like, oh, we will back you super hard if you give us our boy back. And so this is when on January 21st, Ross Ulbricht has been fully pardoned. And Donald Trump says, I just called the mother of Ross William Ulbricht, he misspells his name, to let her know that in honor of her and the libertarian movement.
He's signing the papers. He's like, what did this guy do again? Murder for hire?
Yeah. Which supported me. And they will tell you he didn't get convicted of that.
Yeah.
He didn't get convicted of that.
To be
allegedly.
Clear. Yeah.
It was my pleasure to have signed a full and unconditional pardon of her son Ross. The scum that worked to convict him were some of the same lunatics that were involved in the modern day weaponization of government against me. He was given 2 life sentences plus 40 years. Ridiculous. And Sagar says, I'm no fan of the Silk Road, but the way the FBI set up Ross Ulbricht for life is still one of the most insane cases I've ever read about. And so Sagar is like hugely anti-drug, even anti-weed, marijuana. Cannabis, but still, this is a nuanced topic. And it is possible that someone could be doing something really bad, and then the government can come in and throw the book at them even harder than they should.
Yeah, and so getting kind of into that, you had one of the I forget if they were I don't think they were FBI, but maybe Homeland Security. At one point, one of the guys had was selling secrets to Ross about all the investigations and had made somewhere over $500,000 selling information to Ross about the case, even though he kind of still wanted to get him. But it became this whole game that you could tell that
double agent.
All the agents involved with it were so consumed in the cat and mouse game of chasing this guy. Really, he at one point got citizenship in the Dominican Republic, but it wasn't really a big factor in the story. And so the other thing is, like, you would imagine that this guy would take off and be in Eastern Europe or Asia somewhere. He went to Australia at one point, but he was just really visiting his sister.
I think he did go to the Dominican Republic briefly.
But it was
maybe
just
to set up some accounts.
I think
but
he
that was
needed
it.
to invest like $100K. under six figures to actually get that.
And so let's do a little bit of a tour of the agencies involved in this. The DEA would send agents to infiltrate the marketplace by posing as large-scale narcotics traffickers. The FBI was focused on tracing the Silk Road server, which they eventually got. I think there was one in Iceland or something that they were able to get and decrypt. The IRS wanted to follow the money trail. Homeland Security specialized in customs and import control that recognized that packages from overseas were flooding the U.S. postal system. One key figure was Gary Alford, an IRS investigator who approached the Silk Road puzzle by following internet breadcrumbs. He started analyzing older forum posts discussing Silk Road's launch, focusing on handles like Altoid that might have inadvertently revealed a personal connection.
And so this guy, this IRS agent, ended up getting taken down because he was he was profiting in different ways from the investigation and very, very corrupt.
Yeah.
But he was one of the guys that traced those old forum posts.
Yeah.
Found posts that an account that was called Altoid created by Ross Ulbricht at Gmail.
Yeah.
That then he changed to a fake email called Frosty at Frosty.
Yep.
But then he had used
Frosty
called the Iceland server Frosty.
Yeah.
So they tied that together.
Not enough imagination on the username generation, bro.
Yeah.
You got to get a password generator.
Yeah.
Just go full random. It's the Gary Alford guy. I read a thread about him as well, about how what was interesting was that he didn't have access to like really crazy proprietary databases and the fingerprint database and the DNA database. It was really just like Google. He was just really good at just like Googling around, finding usernames here, piecing things together. And so all of these investigations were hampered by a lack of interagency coordination. Rather than pooling intelligence, each unit often withheld leads, hoping they could be the ones to crack the case. This fragmented approach would simultaneously prolong the manhunt and create openings for suspicious behavior. Indeed, 2 law enforcement agents, Carl Force, DEA, what a great name, and Sean Bridges, Secret Service, would later be indicted for misusing the case to enrich themselves.
Wait,
However,
it wasn't the IRS guy then?
I don't think so. I'm not sure, but
I thought he got taken down as well.
No,
too.
I think Gary Alford was fine.
Okay.
I mean, it was like the whole thing was just
so
chaotic because it's all just happening on the dark web and there's money flowing around in Bitcoin and everyone thinks it's anonymous. It's not, but everyone thinks.
And they would have these meetings called deconfliction meetings.
Yep.
Where they'd bring everybody together and like some people would share information and other people would be like, I'm not going to share that. Like this is my edge in the case. And so it's a very toxic dynamic where within those types of organizations, you rank up and get more titles and comp and paid leave and vacation by cracking cases. And so everybody was self-interested in wanting to crack the case themselves and get credit for it.
Yeah. It's always crazy looking at the numbers. It's like he stole like $50,000 and then like you look at the price of Bitcoin now and it's like, oh, that would have been like, hundreds of millions if they had like been able to hold on to it. But
yeah, the other thing about so law enforcement is like starting to have this like very like multi-pronged chaotic.
Yeah.
And it didn't take them that long to really start to get some real leads into him and start to put the pressure on, right? So at this time they're creating fake identities, they're taking over, they're finding sellers. They're going to sellers and they're saying, we are going to put you in prison for life for selling drugs.
Yep.
Or we'll give you a better sentence if you give us your seller account.
Yeah.
So then they would flip sellers.
Yep.
And then they would just be in there. And they also started flipping like different moderators.
Yep.
And they also just started creating entirely new accounts where they would come in and be like, yeah, I'm a narco trafficker. And then they would slowly develop a friendship. And there was this weird situation where to develop trust, they would have to give him advice
like real advice. Yeah.
Like you should get 3 passports.
Yeah.
You should get fake passports. You should be able to get to Asia. You should have a contingency plan to get here. You should split up your Bitcoin holdings so that, if you get taken down here, like, you'll still, and then on the platform level, they had created this sort of PayPal style system, right?
Yep.
It was very effective. Every now and then a seller would build up so much selling history that it's very easy for them to be like, anybody that sends Bitcoin to this address and sends me their address. So people would circumnavigate the platform, right? This happens with all marketplaces, right? Even on Airbnb, somebody will book an Airbnb for like 2 weeks and then they'll talk to the owner and they'll be like, hey, like, can I just book it through you and like save on the Airbnb fees.
Yep.
And so every now and then these sellers would, there was one that happened on 420 where this certain seller was like, hey, like, if you just pay me directly, like, and they had a big selling history, so everybody trusted them, and they did like 250K in sales in a day, and then just like gone, right?
Yeah.
So that would happen, and then Ross would be in this position where he would have all these people that were mad at him, his users are pissed at him, but he would be like, well, you circumnavigated the platform to try to save what are not crazy. The other crazy thing, so Silk Road's take rate for selling drugs, doing the most illegal activity, is 40% lower than Substack, which sells information.
Is that true? Substack's not 50%.
No, 40% lower. Substack's 10%.
Oh, okay, 6%.
So Silk Road was 6.25%.
And I think it's way lower than OnlyFans too. I think OnlyFans is like 20%.
Yeah,
right?
It's like way. So Ross was so mission oriented that he really believed. The part of the crypto ideals is there's these financial institutions. They have these crazy take rates. And so he's only getting double the take rate basically of Stripe. And Stripe is like the most regulated, just like vanilla, like we sell SaaS. Right? He's selling drugs at scale online, and
he could be taking like 30%, but he's not.
And he's not. And he still had issues because the kind of people he was dealing with, people that are buying small quantities of drugs online are probably not the most affluent crowd for the most part. So they would have issues with it. And so he keeps dealing with this stuff. And he also has, he has issues where, something would happen to a seller and then the cartels would be coming to him saying like, hey, like you owe us $1 million. And then he'd be like trying to do deals with them. Yeah. And so every marketplace founder understands that at a certain point you have this programmatic system that you're running, right? Where like, let's say you have Airbnb, but early days, I'm sure that the Airbnb founders would have to be talking to like one of their listing people and being like, hey, like we got to work this out. Yeah. But in Ross's situation, he was dealing with cartels, narco traffickers, drug dealers, and people buying drugs. And so it's not like they painted a picture like he's just sitting there and like he created the software and just running.
He's just writing code.
But at one point he was wanting to test into a product. He was encouraged by someone in law enforcement who had built up this fake identity that he was friends with. Hey, you should create the Masters of the Silk Road, which was a version of Silk Road specifically for global drug cartels. and so Ross worked with his team. He's like, hey, we got to move a kilo right now. And so he was just selling drugs.
Just drug dealing fully.
He was just fully drug dealing.
It's wild.
And then I don't think Masters of the Silk Road really took off. He also around this time, I don't know where we get to it. So people would start listing weapons.
Well, yeah. So I have some extra. So he kind of finds like a almost pseudo co-founder, this ally Variety Jones, who offers him marketing tips, security advice, and even recommended that Ross consider violent tactics against potential threats. He starts thinking about all this violence and alleged murder for hire plots, which would become pivotal to the federal charges against him. And there's still some debate over whether these plots were real or entrapment. But it's really insane how fast the site grows. We said it started in 2011. By late 2012 and into 2013, Silk Road was grossing hundreds of millions of dollars in transactions. Its user base extended across continents, and shipments were moving through postal systems at astonishing rates. Within this environment, Ross grappled with immense stress, anxious that each day could be his last as a free man. Still, he persisted, motivated by profits, ideology, and perhaps the thrill of running a digital empire unrestrained by traditional
and so
laws.
At this point, he's in San Francisco.
Yep.
He's living in random like he's not living the lifestyle of Pablo Escobar and nice houses and cars. He's living in San Francisco paying cash under a fake identity, something Terry Jones or something like that. He orders fake IDs off of the dark web, off of his own website. So he gets a handful of fake IDs. They get caught in the mail by Homeland Security. And at one point, Homeland Security comes and knocks on his door. And he's like, oh, it's over. Like he thought he was getting taken down. And they were just like, hey, like we got these fake IDs addressed to you.
It's too small of an issue to be big for us. We just want to know more about the dark web.
Yeah. So he's like, no.
Can you
they
break it
were
down
like,
for
can
us?
you tell us, like, we're not going to like do anything right. We're not going to arrest you right now. But where did you get these? And he goes on record and says, there's a site called Silk Road. He can't help himself.
He goes in pitching mode.
He goes into pitching mode, founder mode.
Yeah.
He's like, well, actually, there's this site you can go on called the Silk Road.
It's amazing. Only 6% take rate.
6% take
and
rate.
use this coupon code to sign
and
up.
you can add some other stuff to your cart.
Yeah,
you know?
guns, drugs, do whatever. Yeah. So he's like,
and so he gets on the record at that moment. That was the first time he was in the system for committing a crime, and they added I don't know how it works, but they added notes to like his profile that he had talked about the Silk Road, which ended up coming back to bite him later.
Yeah. And so the DEA at this point is posing as major buyers. The FBI is focusing on these high-tech methods. They find a server it is in Iceland, and there's a bunch of friction between the different agencies because no one really knows who's dealing with cybercrime. So Jared Duryegian.
That's Duryegian.
Duryegian, who was the
This is a guy
Homeland
who's
Security.
just obsessed. Duryegian had collected thousands of orders that he had personally caught.
Yeah.
And he had just been categorizing them and tracing them to different seller profiles.
And he's flipping the dealers to become become informants. He gleaned details about Silk Road's internal workings, including how vendors ship products. Other groups try to trace the site's IP addresses using advanced hacking techniques. At one point, the FBI exploited what might have been a misconfiguration in a Silk Road CAPTCHA or login screen, gleaning a real IP address that led them to a data center in Iceland. So the whole goal of Tor is to mask the IP address and route through a bunch of different anyone who's running a Tor server all over. So you could if you just have Spectrum or AT&T internet, you can spin up a Tor server and then you're routing random traffic constantly. And so that anonymizes things because the traffic's just going all over the place. You can't trace it all. And so anytime it goes through some random server, it comes out the other side randomized or disguised, and it's very, very hard to track down. But they found the actual IP address because it seems like the CAPTCHA that was being rendered wasn't going through Tor. It was going through it wasn't being anonymized properly. Yeah. So they figure it out. They issue the warrant.
This is something that happens throughout the whole Silk Road journey is because he's a first-time developer, first-time founder,
rookie.
He's just making all these mistakes and oftentimes suffering financial losses, but the site's doing so well and growing so quickly, the losses are offset. But the one thing that's kind of hard to make up for is getting caught.
Getting caught. And so they grab the server from Iceland, decrypt it, and it's like the database. It has all the information, and then they're combing through it for clues that could lead them to who this guy is, or how the
and it wasn't hard
works.
to flip the whatever company in Iceland had the server.
Oh, no.
You get approached by U.S. law enforcement. They're like, we believe people are committing crimes on your server.
And they're just like, you just want us to copy it? Sure, no problem.
Yeah.
Whatever.
And that goes in, and to be clear, as they uncovered, they got data on all the buyers and sellers and presumably all the transactions that had happened in Silk Road history, right?
Oh, yeah.
It was encrypted, but they were able to basically crack it.
Yeah, and every escrow transaction is logged in a database because it has to, even though the blockchain might be somewhat anonymized, it's not anonymized when it sits on the database record of the Silk Road, which they got access to.
And so it's not like every person who had ever bought drugs or sold drugs on the Silk Road suffered from that.
Yeah.
But if the government had wanted to, they could have gone and knocked on all the addresses.
Exactly.
Obviously, people would use fake addresses and fake names and things like that. But
and so by 2013, enough agencies had processed enough scraps of evidence that Ross Ulbricht's identity was starting to come into focus, though they had yet to conclusively tie him to Dread Pirate Roberts. Ross, for his part, was often oblivious to the scale of the manhunt, trusting in Tor and Bitcoin's layers of security while continuing to manage Silk Road from cafes and libraries around San Francisco. And so the corruption scandal continues. Carl Mark Force IV and Sean Bridges of the Secret Service. What a great name.
Mark Force.
The DEA and the Secret Service is one of the most dramatic subplots here. Both men were tasked with bringing down the Silk Road, yet they exploited their positions for personal gain. Force, who operated undercover personas like Knob on Silk Road, directly interacted with DPR.
And so Knob was basically boys with.
Oh yeah,
He
they
was
were like chatting
absolute
constantly,
boys, talking all day long.
Yeah.
Knob would give him Knob is the guy who'd give him advice. You should get more passports.
Yeah.
Things like that. And people were like, dude, stop giving him such
Yeah.
good advice.
And he messed up because at one point he had a fake account and was chatting with Dread Pirate Roberts and was like it's Carl or something like that. And he was like, wait, what? And he was like, oh, Carl, Carla. Like I go by a bunch of different names.
But that was all on. That was all on record.
Logged. Yeah.
And then was it Sean Bridges at one point that later, once Sean knew he was getting caught, Sean was like, I will get you killed in prison.
Yeah.
Like he was like threatening, like you're gonna get caught.
It's
delete
all
these
messy.
records. And so, yeah, it was basically slop on both sides.
Yeah, very sloppy. And so from Ross's perspective, these agents' manipulative activities made the Silk Road environment feel ever more treacherous. Logs released in court showed Ross confiding to trusted confidants that he suspected infiltration at every turn. He also struggled with evaluating demands for hush money or hits on suspected blackmailers. Whether Ross seriously believed in orchestrating murder for hire or if he was cornered into entertaining the idea is still debated. Nevertheless, chat logs indicate that Ross agreed to pay for violent solutions if it meant protecting Silk Road's anonymity and his own.
Yeah, so this is when I posted this, and a lot of people are like, "Oh, you left out murder for hire."
Yeah.
Obviously, on this post, I was purely talking about the business, not endorsing his actions in any way. But yeah, he over the course of this 2013 era got very comfortable with the idea of paying to get people killed. So these were people that he thought were informants, people that he thought were just generally bad actors.
Yep.
There's records of him ordering hits and actually negotiating the price of hits, saying, being kind of frustrated with how expensive something would be, and the person would be like, well, it's like last minute, and it's kind of a complicated situation, and he'd be like, okay. He would be provided photo evidence of success, what he thought were successful hits. At one point, law enforcement faked one of the hits using like Campbell's soup. And they were taking and using like crappy phone images to like take a picture of somebody's face, like with like Campbell's soup, like as if their face had been like
blown off
or whatever.
Yeah.
So very, very dark. Like he clearly at this point was like living this dual life of like he's Ross and then he's Dread Pirate Roberts.
Yeah.
And he's willing to do anything to protect the pirate ship.
Yeah, exactly.
Silk Road.
Yeah. And I think we have a post here. It's probably a few deep, Ben, but this is a screenshot from Reddit. It says, are there any merits to the claims that he hired a hitman to kill Friendly Chemist, someone on Silk Road who said they would leak personal info on thousands of Silk Road users unless paid $500K? I've never seen this discussed in our weekly Ross posts.
Yeah, so this was, there was a user who hacked the server in some way. They were able to uncover quite a lot of data on like the sellers.
Yep.
And so Ross was worried that, if people realize that if you bought something on the platform and that your personal information could be exposed, then obviously it was going to really slow down sales.
Yep.
He's also facing competition at this time.
Yep.
Other sites are popping up that are doing the same thing.
Yep.
So he really didn't want this information to get leaked.
Yep.
And he,
someone replies to this and says, Ross ordered hits on 4 to 5 people total. The evidence of this, the evidence that he did this is clear. No one here likes talking about this because it ruins the narrative. Now, the sentence for ordering a hit in California, if I recall correctly, is 10 years per contract. So he definitely got a harsher sentence than this, but there were other crimes he was guilty of. Not that it will save me from downvotes, but El Chapo is significantly worse than Ross, and any system that gives Chapo less time than Ross is busted. But to ignore that Ross didn't try to have people executed for doing no favors to anyone who wants to have an honest discussion about justice. And I think that's just a very interesting thing where there was this like big narrative. And if we go back to this debate between Matt Palmer and Joe Posting, Matt says Ross Ulbricht's work was one of the largest contributions to harm reduction in narcotics distribution ever. The systems he created removed violence from the drug trade by anonymizing and physically dislocating transactions. He almost certainly saved thousands of lives. But Joe says, skeptical of this claim, the vast majority of drug trade violence is caused by production, namely South American cartels and opium warlords in the Golden Triangle. Silk Road made retail purchases safer, but that's small potatoes next to the back end. And it's funny because, it's like, yeah, he might have removed some violence, but then he added it all back by trying to commit hits. It's like, come on. It's just a ridiculous situation. But moving on, we're in mid-2013, and there are enough threads of investigation that had converged that a direct confrontation with Ross Ulbricht was inevitable. Each agency.
So at this time, they had figured out a number of people. So they started with profiles. Like, we think he's a smart guy. We think he's in America. We think he's.
Oh, one of the ways they figured out was hilarious was that he had posted something about how buying drugs on the street is dangerous, and he says something about like those people, and so they use that to justify this idea that he came from like a white middle class upbringing and was not like a street guy, because he would have said like, when we buy stuff on the street we get shot and killed. He was like they get shot and killed, and so that made it clear that he wasn't like from the rough and tumble streets.
And so at one point he was a suspect just based on his profile of being, interested in technology and libertarianism and all this stuff. But they still were like, people didn't believe that he could have done it because he didn't fit the hacker, like internet hacker developer archetype. Because they were like, well, he didn't study computer science. And so they had this other suspect who had run like a Bitcoin forum that was like more of the prime suspect at the time. So he had some non-believers in law enforcement that were like, it could be Ross, but like, we don't think he's got that dog in him.
Yeah. And so the main breakthrough came from Gary Alford, the IRS agent, and he was convinced that Ross Ulbricht made a slip up early on. And so he scoured internet forums such as bitcointalk.org and shroomery.org, going back to the earliest.
Was where he was
posted, hey, anybody want to get some shrooms? Check out this website.
No, he was like, has anybody bought shrooms from Silk Road?
Yeah.
And it was him selling the shrooms.
And so he reasoned that whoever created the site might have posted about it during its infancy before it was famous enough to attract major scrutiny. And this is very funny. This actually happened in my high school. There was someone who put up a cyberbullying type website, and the easiest way to figure out who was behind it's still like myth in my high school, but I'm convinced I know who it was because I basically traced it back to patient zero, and the first person to say anything about it was likely the person that did it. Yeah. Because like, how else would it go viral? Like, it has to have somebody that introduces it, because if a website's just up there on the internet, like, no one's going to find that. But the first person to say, hey, have you seen this? That person is,
guilty.
And I'm very convinced of this. So Alford, this is Gary Alford. He discovered a user named Altoid posting in January of 2011, right at the start of Silk Road, mentioning Silk Road and suggesting people check it out. Further digging reveals that the same user had made a subsequent post looking to hire a tech specialist, leaving the email address rossulbricht@gmail.com. This was the smoking gun Alford had been searching for, as it linked a real-life individual to Silk Road's initial marketing efforts. While other investigators were pursuing the server's physical location, Alford's simpler forensic analysis of publicly available posts provided a direct link to Ross.
And so Ross had gone back to that forum. He knew he had kind of messed up, and so he changed the email on that account to a fake email.
Yeah, but you can see the change.
But then you can see the change, and then the name he used for the fake email ended up being the same name he used to name the server. Yep. So he had he liked the name Frosty or something.
Yeah,
like that.
and so at this point, they were definitely suspicious of Ross, but they needed to catch him red-handed, logged in as the Dread Pirate Roberts on his laptop if they hoped to secure a watertight prosecution. Detective work in the digital age can hinge on human error. The Altoid handle and the Gmail address turned out to be one of Ross's biggest mistakes, an unintentional breadcrumb left behind before the Silk Road success.
One thing I'll note here, this is just speculation, but his girlfriend at one point said that he was a big marijuana fan. I think he admitted to it at different points as Dread Pirate Roberts. And marijuana is a performance decreasing drug. It makes people forgetful. It makes people anxious and all these things. And so imagining him as a first-time developer, high all the time, trying to, committing crimes at scale. And again, I respect the libertarian view that says, well, nothing he's doing was wrong, but he was committing crimes by way of our legal system.
Yeah, yeah.
And so imagining him just like hanging around San Francisco smoking pot, like being a narco trafficker, it's like not it's inevitable. There's other people that would have made it like 7 years, 8 years, 9 years, 10 years. There's narco that like real narcos that make it 30 years.
Yeah,
right?
They buy soccer teams.
Yeah.
Mansions.
They get presidents elected.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So it's actually wild to think about if he had maybe not as intense a marijuana habit or gone and went to Russia or something like that.
Totally.
There's a world where he would have become like a Bitcoin, 100 billionaire, like one of the wealthiest, most like, influential people in the world, and could have been out of reach in many ways.
Totally. Yeah. It is so funny that he, his whole philosophy was based on this idea of like drugs aren't this gateway, nothing bad can happen if you start doing a lot of drugs, and then he is the best case study for drugs ruining your life. Like, drugs completely ruined his life. Started doing drugs, then started selling drugs, then started trying to get people killed, then got massively arrested and thrown in jail for a decade. It's like, drugs were not good for you, bro. Like, calm down.
Yep.
And so as the law enforcement officials homed in on Ross Ulbricht, they began careful physical surveillance. His whole laptop was heavily encrypted, and he had a single button that if he pushed it, it would lock and encrypt the hard drive. So even if you got access to it, you couldn't access it without a password. They had no way to guess the password. It would take a computer millions of years to, decrypt that, or hundreds of years to force the decryption. Although maybe it's faster now, who knows? But at the time they were very worried, and they were like, we have to get him while his hands are on the keyboard or hands off the keyboard, but he's still logged in. And so they were excited about the idea that he kept working in public spaces because they could stage an unexpected confrontation.
And it's just the irony here of him in another reality. He would have been in Y Combinator just absolutely crushing it on some like normal business. Yeah. And so he would have been in these coffee shops in San Francisco at the explosion of the sharing economy and mobile.
Oh, yeah.
And he would be sitting next to people that, it's not unlikely that some like very well-known founders today, like were in the same coffee shop, right?
Totally.
The craziness of doing this all like from the epicenter of tech.
I lived in San Francisco when this happened. and I would go to this library. I would go to the San Francisco Public Library. I actually worked out of there a few times.
Crazy.
And so on October 1st, 2013, Ross Ulbricht walked into the Glen Park branch of the San Francisco Public Library, sat down and opened his laptop. Unbeknownst to him, undercover agents sat nearby. Agents orchestrated a ruse where one undercover officer posed as a feuding couple, creating a minor commotion to divert Ross's attention. As Ross turned his head, other agents sprang from behind, grabbing his laptop before he could even move to close the lid. The narrative of the takedown is cinematic. Ross is stunned, half standing, and as FBI pushes him back into his seat and secures arms.
To visualize this, a male and a female agent start yelling and like pushing each other. Yeah. He looks over.
And then the person just reaches. Yeah. It's literally a woman who's an agent who just sits right across the table and just is like, pull this away. Don't touch it. And so
has it open. And so they immediately, what they do is they take it. They take it and they rush it to a van outside. Yeah. Like imagine like you're like trying to keep your computer from going to sleep.
Oh yeah, that's what they're doing.
And so they're making sure they're moving the mouse.
Move the mouse.
And so for the next like 10 hours, they just sit there like moving the mouse and like downloading all of the data off the computer and like backing it. I think they backed it up like 9 times in 9 different ways. Yeah. And you could imagine because when after we'll talk about this in a bit, as they go to prosecute him, the defense's main defense is that it wasn't Ross.
Yeah.
That's their main thing. They were like the real else. Dread Pirate Roberts framed him. They put all this evidence on his laptop, but they obviously caught him.
Yeah, literally red-handed. Yeah,
and
it's like if there was like some sort of like screen sharing software where maybe he was just using his computer and then the real Dread Pirate Roberts was like, putting evidence on there. There would be evidence of that software.
But they tracked him so many times where they would be physically viewing him. He's typing.
And it'd be like he logs on.
Because they had moles on the Silk Road team. So they had like law enforcement was being paid to work for the Silk Road. And so they would see when he logged on, he'd be typing, and they would be recording all of this where they'd be watching him typing and Dread Pirate Roberts is typing, And so it was kind of a tough argument to make, even though various members of law enforcement were committing their own heinous crimes. It's sort of difficult to defend.
And related to that, we have a post from Sam Parr. He did a podcast on Ross Ulbricht, the founder of Silk Road, and he says he admitted to creating the Silk Road, but said he sold it to a new owner, and they're the ones who did the murder for hire. What do you think? Was Ross the owner the entire time, or ordered to murder for hire, or no? Why? And Anthony J. Descenzo says, of course he owned and operated it the entire time. He admitted to creating the Silk Road at the beginning and was caught red-handed working on the administration page at the ending. And he follow his Bitcoins from start to finish. And I completely agree with that.
He had tried to... He told his girlfriend once that he was no longer running it. Then she walked in on him after they were hanging out.
There's just so much evidence. It's so clear.
And then later he even had this crisis on the platform where he made a post where he's like, I'm going to change the way I talk so that it's less obvious who I am. And then everybody was like, got really mad at him because they were like, wait, is this safe to use now? Did they flip him or something like that?
Yeah. So in the days following his arrest, the global community of Silk Road users found themselves in disarray. Vendors, buyers, and administrators scrambled to figure out whether their personal identities had been compromised, because as part of the onboarding process to work for the Silk Road, you would have to send him a photo of your real driver's license. Yeah. And it was kind of this getting sworn in into the secret society. There was panic over Bitcoin funds held in escrow, which now seemed out of reach. People posted frantic messages on the dark web, some lamenting the loss of their livelihood. Oh, it's terrible. You build a drug business and it just goes up in smoke one day. Others questioning whether the Dread Pirate Roberts persona might somehow live on. Law enforcement officials. Also, it's like if there was a real Dread Pirate Roberts who his fall guy gets busted, why wouldn't he just keep operating the site?
Make a new fall guy.
Make a new thing. Just.
But you can think about it. So at this point,
or even just move the Bitcoin to something else.
They're doing hundreds of millions of volume a year.
Yeah.
And you could imagine at any one point there's, I don't know, a very rough estimate would be $100 million of drugs changing hands. And so that was quite a lot of money that was just locked up in escrow at this time. That was clearly the Silk Road team had to be the team that would approve when, the recipient would say, yes, got it.
Yep.
Then they would approve, the payout.
Yeah. And so afterwards, after the arrest, law enforcement officials lauded the arrest as a significant victory in the war on cybercrime. Politicians who had long criticized Silk Road took credit for pushing agencies to shut it down. Mainstream media coverage exploded with headlines labeling Ross as everything from a brilliant hacker to a modern-day outlaw. The sensationalism surrounding the Kingpin moniker overshadowed the complexities of Ross's motivation. He was painted as a cold-blooded trafficker who profited off of addiction and despair. I think that's probably correct. His friends and family were stunned.
He definitely was coldblooded.
Totally.
He was able to separate the nice guy, Ross, who had a loving family, from he fully embodied the Dread Pirate Roberts.
I wonder if there's anyone that gets to this level that isn't cold-blooded, though. It's kind of a prerequisite.
Every billion-dollar, every unicorn CEO that I know,
cold-blooded,
even the ones that are nice, you can tell.
Ice in their veins.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the government's forensic teams sifted through the trove of data from Ross's computer. They discovered personal diaries, chat logs between Dread Pirate Roberts and administrators, and spreadsheets detailing profits. The data portrayed a person intimately involved in day-to-day operations, from vendor disputes to strategies and strategies for evading law enforcement.
You could just call that drug arguments.
It's just how to evade the government, federal, the IRS.txt. How to beat the
that was a big
Service.
part of this. He was not living this high life because he had all this Bitcoin, but he couldn't really figure out a way to get it off chain.
Yeah. It was clear that Ross faced a battery of charges: money laundering, computer hacking, drug trafficking, and conspiracy to commit murder. The last charge stemmed from his suspected willingness to eliminate threats to Silk Road's anonymity. Whether or not actual violence occurred, federal prosecutors used the chat transcripts to argue that Ross was willing to orchestrate killings. As the immediate chaos settled, the case moved toward a long legal process that would captivate the public and set legal precedents about dark web marketplaces. And so the defense strategy, the legal defense strategy for Ross, focused in on a few key ideas. Wrongful identification. They argued that Ross wasn't the true Dread Pirate Roberts and that the real DPR had set him up. reliability of evidence. They questioned whether the laptop data could have been tampered with, especially considering the corruption charges.
Because of how corrupt many members, or not many, but at
least
two,
Carl Force and Sean Bridges.
Carl Force.
It's like, maybe there was something weird going on.
Yeah, and they were encouraging him to do things that were like that was a whole. Like I think it was Knob who would be like, you should take this guy out. You know? And it's
they definitely
and
pushed
law
him
enforcement
on that.
helped
the entrapment thing.
They helped him.
Yeah.
They were involved with helping fake these sort of murders as well.
Yeah. And so they wound up not convicting him of that, but it definitely like set the tone of the trial and kind of get people out of this mindset of like, he just built a website. It's like, he built a website guy, and maybe he did this other stuff. We're not even going to push him on that, but it like threw
maybe he did a
else.
few things that didn't scale. But it also is interesting. It would have been sort of, I imagine, untenable if he was convicted on the murder for hire stuff to actually get pardoned. So that small detail, I think it doesn't seem like Trump knows his actual name.
Yeah,
but I imagine there would have been much more pushback if he had been actually convicted of.
So look at this digital diary. There's an excerpt in here that says, "I'm doing about $2 million a week in sales now." They also had logs with references to specific violent acts that Ross had allegedly considered or at least verbally agreed to pay for.
And so he had
plea deal.
Sent
he says now
$750,000 of money to fund hits.
Yeah.
So he was paying for the hits.
Yeah.
They weren't happening.
So he pleads not guilty. And there's a public trial. His mother becomes a tireless advocate for his cause. They argued that the government was making an example out of him, which I think is probably true since this was like the first major cybercrime deep web case.
Yeah.
And if they didn't throw the book at him, there would just be a million more.
And there was there was Gawker articles. Like that
exactly.
was what catalyzed
it became
all.
Mainstream for sure.
And so it's very embarrassing to law enforcement to have a website that anybody can go to buy.
Yep.
That's if law enforcement can log in and view it, and regular like a high school kid can do it, and some grandma can do it.
Yeah, it's just such a violation of like the social contract there.
Yeah.
In the end, the case would be resolved in the public eye, with Ross heading to trial January of 2015, a date that would not only decide his fate, but set a precedent for the future of dark web marketplaces. The trial took place in New York in Manhattan Federal Court, presided over by Judge Catherine Forrest. It was a high-profile case, and the courtroom was often packed with journalists, curious onlookers, and Ross supporters. The atmosphere was tense. The prosecution presented a mountain of files taken from Ross's laptops.
So this was part of the challenge for the defense, is there was like 6 terabytes of data that they were like using against him, and so they're like, we're gonna use all of this against you. Like, good luck. One other thing he benefited from is he had tried to set up a Silk Road armory.
Oh yeah,
but it totally flopped.
Yeah.
Sometimes you hit PMF with one thing.
Side project.
He realized that it was like much harder to like send guns in the mail.
Oh yeah, totally.
But he was trying to sell. I think you could buy explosives on the Silk Road.
Grenades, and you can buy fully automatic weapons.
Which is just like even I think that gave Ross some pause around that.
This was the libertarian thing that always got to me. It's like he would argue that I am willing to consent to sell drugs. You're willing to buy drugs. Therefore, the government has no say in that. But there's always this question of like negative externalities. And what got to me was like, well, at a certain point, you were selling like cyanide, and also it's like, okay, even if that's not bad between the two parties, what about the UPS guy that has to carry that? Like, did they opt into that?
So if explosives are going into the mail,
it's like, oh, I'm just a FedEx driver, and now I have to carry grenades. Like, I didn't opt into that. Like, in your libertarian philosophy, I don't consent to that.
Libertarianism seems to work if you had a private island.
Yes,
and everybody there is there by their own.
Joke.
Yeah, I mean, like,
it sounds like it.
I mean, it's basically going there. But it's when your actions are affecting other people that are participating in a society that has agreed to have certain laws.
Yeah, you never think about the next negative externality of, okay, you brought these drugs in, and then the drug dealer's on the street and commits violence because of this, or you're funding it's always just, let's look at just the one micro interaction and not consider the knock-on effects. And that's why we have like an actual society and societal contract. And so the government witnesses included law enforcement agents who had participated in Silk Road investigations. Ross's defense contended that he was set up. Friends testified to his peaceful nature, pointing out how out of character it was for him to order violence or run a massive drug site. Over the course of 3 weeks, jurors were presented with a dizzying array of digital exhibits, as you mentioned, 6 terabytes or something like that, IP addresses, chat logs, and email addresses. And on February 4th, 2015, after only a few hours of deliberation, the jury returned a guilty verdict on all 7 counts, including narcotics trafficking, computer hacking, money laundering, and maintaining an ongoing criminal enterprise.
Yeah, and so to be clear here, this was like 3 weeks. It was not the kind of trial that stretches on for months and months or years. It was like very quick, and the deck was certainly stacked against him, right? He had all these different agencies that were, and there was so much evidence.
Yeah. And when you think about other trials, it's like, well, yeah, like maybe they got some photos or something, or maybe they kicked down a door and they found someone with something. But it's all there's always this question of like, oh, was it planted? But when you show someone 6 terabytes of like, okay, we got his computer, his hands are on the keyboard,
into this profile,
he was logged in. It's a lot harder to paint the
and even this is why it ends up being really hard for law enforcement to pin down traditional narcos because they get them on money laundering and things like that. Or wire fraud, this stuff that's like unrelated.
Was it Al Capone went down for tax evasion, not drug trafficking?
And it's because it's really hard, especially the Ross was able to build a massive enterprise quickly because of the internet. But he also generated a massive amount of data related to that activity. And a narco, you have like, them on like a radio, talking or whatever. There's less of. A lot of narcos, at least in Mexico, have like regular businesses too that they're talking about. Right? And so not the same mountain of evidence.
Sentencing happens a couple months later, May 29th, 2015. Judge Catherine Forrest sentences him to 2 life sentences plus 40 years. And because it's a federal case, there's no possibility of parole. So he is truly screwed. And this was it was significantly harsher than typical sentences for nonviolent drug offenses, especially given his age, 31 at the time.
Which is like,
it's not that young, but
the whole 30,
he was young. He did this in his 20s, but he wasn't a teenager who was like,
his prefrontal cortex was
fully
developed. And he had a good 5-year run with a full cortex. Full cortex mode.
Yeah. And so,
but he was smoking pot. They should have included that.
Yeah. Ross appealed the decision, and this outcome underscored the U.S. justice system's stance on dark web marketplaces, an uncompromising approach that signaled to future clandestine operators that they too could face the rest of their lives in prison. And we didn't really see a replacement pop up very quickly. It was pretty.
I don't know.
I think it was effective.
Many of these transactions like still occur on the dark. Like I think,
but I can't tell you.
But there's
like
not a
Silk
brand
Web
name.
2.0.
No, so here's
the
thing. I think historically, anytime a drug has become a brand name, they get taken down, right?
Sure.
And so like that's why when you think about billions of dollars a year of cocaine gets consumed in the U.S. There's no brand that you can think of, right? Sure. And as soon as you tie a brand to it, then there's like, well, now we can start tracing this, so it's just
is
like
this Colombian cocaine.
It's sort of that one's more obvious.
Yeah,
but I imagine that this way more volume happens now. It's just not these sort of brand name marketplaces, right?
Yeah.
Silk Road was the DoorDash,
it really was,
or the Uber of
it was
hits.
Crazy.
Whatever you wanted.
And so Carl Force and Sean Bridges, after the Ross conviction, the scandal emerges, and they get sentenced to 6.5 and 6 years, and then more when further misconduct was discovered, and so they go to jail for stealing a bunch of money and basically not doing their job at all. Meanwhile,
it's a weird thing. They were trying to catch him, but they were also trying to make a buck in the process.
Yeah.
Weird thing.
And so it goes on, but let's move. So that was, 2015. In 2016 to 2017, Ross Ulbricht appeals his conviction to the U.S. Court of Appeals, asserting evidence was tainted by law enforcement corruption, but the court upheld the guilty verdict. In May of 2017, the Second Circuit of New York reaffirms Ross's life sentence, reasoning that the massive scope of Silk Road justifies an exceptionally harsh penalty. In 2018, June 28th, the U.S. Supreme Court declines to hear Ross's final appeal, effectively exhausting his direct legal avenues for overturning the conviction. Lynn Ulbricht, during this time, 2015 onward, spearheads the Free Ross movement nationwide, championing her son's cause.
And Lynn is a cracked marketer.
Cracked. Absolutely.
Like, she went to town for her son.
And so in December of 2021, the Ulbricht family auctions Ross's writings and artwork as NFTs online, raising millions through the decentralized organization Free Ross DAO to support continued legal efforts. In 2021 to 2022, a stash of over 50,000 stolen Bitcoin from the Silk Road is seized by the U.S. government, and Ross relinquishes any claim to help satisfy his $183 million restitution order. And in 2024, Pirate Wires reported on April 2nd that the U.S. government has moved roughly $2 billion in Bitcoin confiscated from Silk Road to what's reported to be a Coinbase wallet per CoinDesk.
Yeah, and everybody's like, are they going to market sell this?
Are they going to sell this? It's going to be bad. Everyone's worried. And so in May of 2022, Congressman Thomas Massey calls publicly in the House of Representatives for Ross's commutation, viewing the life sentence as a grave injustice beyond appropriate punishment. And
yeah, and to be clear, it is a bad precedent that law enforcement agencies can commit a bunch of their own crimes in the effort to take somebody down, and then still, if they get like it is a terrible precedent, right? We want to live in a society ideally where nobody, a vibey libertarian utopia where nobody's nobody's like hurting each other, but then if one person commits a crime, it doesn't justify another person to commit crimes in order to take that person down. And so while we both believe that many of the things that he did were net negative and bad, it is, the people on the other side of that don't believe he did anything wrong. They also have I don't necessarily think they have a good point there. They do have a point that it's a bad precedent that, law enforcement should be able to commit crimes and then still, deliver this very intense sentencing. Yeah.
And so let's go through some of the more recent facts about how we got to the pardon. In May of 2024, Donald Trump promises that he will pardon Ross on day one, swaying libertarian-minded voters and crypto enthusiasts. In June of 2024, RFK Jr., running for president, similarly vows in a public statement to grant Ross a pardon. In November, Chase Oliver, the Libertarian Party's presidential
wanted to spotlight Silk Road's role in pioneering cryptocurrency, which is kind of like everybody's like really just trying to
get the crypto
into the marketing
for sure. Yeah. The Libertarian Party's presidential nominee reaffirms in Reason magazine that a full pardon aligns with fundamental libertarian principles. Kind of debate that. And then on January 21st, 2025, President Donald Trump signs a full and unconditional pardon from the Oval Office, fulfilling his campaign pledge.
And so the crazy thing about this is, like, imagine you're Ross, you're in jail for a decade.
Yeah.
Trump gets elected, signs a doc. 48 hours later, you just walk out of prison.
Yeah. You're free.
And that's why I felt like this was I wouldn't have wanted to cover this story at all a month ago.
Yeah.
Because it was just purely dark. It's like, okay, he committed a bunch of crimes. Now he's life in jail. Yes, he was.
Now he's off to
the execution
Road.
From a business standpoint. Yeah, now he's taking on the road show. No, and there's rumors that he's still worth, presumably.
Yeah. It seems like he might have had a second or third Bitcoin wallet that was not seized, and so he might have come out with a lot of wealth.
Yeah,
which would be fascinating. And
he was
I think,
forced to hold it.
Yeah. Ultimate hodler. And so Ross, now free, speaks across the U.S. about prison reform, cybersecurity, and the lessons of Silk Road, aiming to reshape his legacy in the libertarian movement. And he's pardoned and living under close public scrutiny, continues to champion libertarian advocacy and prison rehabilitation efforts. So it'll be interesting to see once he actually does like the Joe Rogan style interview or the Lex Friedman, like the full story. I am interested to hear his side of this. I wonder.
I would be surprised if he doubles down and says I wasn't DPR.
That would be interesting.
Does
he need to do that if he's been pardoned? He doesn't need to.
No, he doesn't need to do that. So if he does do that, that would be, and then he's able to prove like through some crazy thing, which I don't believe.
Yep.
The main thing, my main takeaway is this guy is a goated operator.
That's true.
Like clearly, like he benefited from some luck and timing and was like this missionary founder, but self-taught developer, first-time CEO, bootstrapped, 0 to $1 billion in sales. Very, very profitable the entire way, operating a remote team.
Yeah.
He has clearly is very powerful.
In some ways, he's
got insane aura.
Yeah.
And if he uses that for good,
it could be very good.
It could be very good.
In some ways, he's playing the game on hard mode in the sense that, as you mentioned, he can't talk about people. You know, he can't talk to anyone about his business. He can't, get, public investors or advisors or anything. But on the other side, he is selling the most addictive and product that just has immense pull from the market because it's illegal. And so, I don't know how much credit you actually want to give him. Let's go through some more posts. We got Captain Nemo says Silk Road's historical importance is still underrated. I thought that was interesting from 2022. This is well before the pardon. And there's another post from Captain Nemo in here. 2022 says the ultimate tech anon moment was when Forbes did an interview with the Dread Pirate Roberts, the anonymous founder of Silk Road, at the height of Silk Road's ascent, when multiple federal agencies were trying and failing to track him down. It's so funny that he did an anonymous interview successfully with Forbes, because it's like now, Beth Bezos can't stay undoxed and like can't do an interview without getting doxed. And this guy was able to stay anonymous while appearing in Forbes. Let's go
one note, friend of the show, Lone Ranger says Donald Trump paved the way to the White House as a quote unquote convicted felon, giving Ross a clear path to a presidential run in the future. Ross, who turned 40 in prison, is now old enough to run for president and could be the first libertarian president if elected. So that's a stretch to me.
It's a joke, but it's one of those things where it's like maybe.
But oftentimes the most entertaining
outcome is the most likely. I agree.
And it does feel like not totally out of like if Ross's goal is to create a libertarian utopia, United States is awesome. So it would be a great place to be a true utopia. And if that's what he believes, now he's got a few $100 million. He can finance a campaign.
I will be campaigning against him. That's all I can say.
Yeah.
We need law and order.
Law and order.
Captain Nemo continues and says, more recently, he posted this January 21st when Ross was pardoned. Hard to overstate how impactful it was to be a young, earnestly curious student when Ross Ulbricht was running Silk Road as the Dread Pirate Roberts, operating a completely illegal digital bazaar openly for years, despite every effort to stop it by the most powerful nation state ever. Massive Hansonian viewquake viscerally opened my eyes to technology's power to reshape existing power dynamics and sow the flow of history for better or worse. Yeah, and I think that's super interesting to think about how powerful the internet and this new technology was, that even though it was only 2 years and he did get shut down, he went on a generational run and was able to actually do this thing that no one else was able to do purely because of technology.
Crypto for a long time was looking for use cases outside of Bitcoin being digital gold, meme coins being speculation, and other activities. And the most obvious use case outside of digital gold that had the craziest product market fit was the Silk Road, right? But no crypto VC could be like, oh, look what's possible. Like this is the potential of crypto, because it was just like thousands of crimes being committed a day, like at scale. It's funny because everybody that was, if all the people that had just been, committing crimes with BTC early days of Silk Road, if they had just bought and held, they'd all be millionaires because they'd be using like 20 Bitcoin to buy like one pill, so that was like an expensive night on the town,
the stories around Bitcoin have evolved so much. Like version 1 was this, we've used math to solve the general's problem, and it's going to be decentralized and not controlled by the government and perfectly anonymous. And then a lot of those stories kind of eroded and it became just this crime money basically. And then it somehow made it through that and just became digital gold. And then there were new narratives around, oh, well, there'll be all these like games and metaverse built on top of it. And then that kind of melted away. And now it's prediction markets and meme coins and digital gold and just kind of a store of value. Yeah. But it's interesting that at every point in time, there's been so many negative narratives about this is the worst thing ever, but there's been this one enduring narrative that's stuck with it and driven value, and now it's at 100K. It's like, it's crazy.
Well, yeah, and it's still, even though honest analysis of crypto technology, you could never say this isn't cool.
Exactly.
Like this isn't like this crazy, truly novel, transformative technology.
Yeah.
It's just that the primary case study was a nefarious use case, right?
Yep.
But it's still incredible that you could operate an open air drug bazaar online that anybody could go to and see, and law enforcement could see and not do anything about. Like that is a wild.
It was insane.
Wild. Situation.
And so let's go to Catherine Hahn, former GP at Andreessen Crypto, now with Hahn Ventures, and she is quoting I think the founder of Chainalysis, which is a company that does research into how crypto is used nefariously. Joni Levin says, "Today is my proudest day at Chainalysis. We enabled US, UK, Germany, and South Korea to take down one of the largest child abuse material sites. Law enforcement in 38 countries made 330 arrests of alleged pedophiles and rescued 23 children from abuse." And Catherine Hahn says, "Great work by Chainalysis and the authorities in such an important case. As I found when working on the Silk Road corrupt agent and other cases, having the digital breadcrumbs of crypto was a useful tool for law enforcement." And so she's actually saying that, like, the reason that she was able, I didn't know this, but I guess she worked on those corrupt agents in the Silk Road case. And the reason
the agents were obviously taking payment in Bitcoin.
Exactly. And so they were able to trace the Bitcoin, where it moved out of the Silk Road account into their account, and then was eventually taken off chain. And I think they were buying like sports cars and stuff. And so they were able to figure that out and track it down. And she was saying, like, if this was fiat, that would not have been possible. And so that's actually the exact opposite narrative that people were telling in crypto, but it still worked out.
I don't know if she's saying it wasn't possible, but normally
much harder.
So if a corrupt agent takes a cash payment,
exactly,
there's not a record of that.
Yeah, the classic, like, you kick down the door, you've gotten the drug kingpin, and there's a huge stack of cash, a huge stack of cocaine, and then a bunch of luxury watches, and you're just like, throw the watches in the backpack.
One node.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we got a lot of cash and a lot of cocaine. I didn't see any gold bars there.
Yeah.
Throw it in the backpack. And like, you see this in like Training Day and like those kind of cop movies. And there probably some element of truth, and a lot of good agents
wild.
It
shows
don't do that.
It shows the fact that Catherine was working on this crazy high profile case.
Yeah.
Still recognize the potential of crypto, and goes on to have a $2 billion fund now. She was a GP
at Andreessen, really during like a historic run. Yeah.
2021.
Coinbase and stuff. Fascinating.
So wild story.
So let's go to a promoted post. We're done with the Ross Ulbricht story. I hope you enjoyed it. We're moving on. We're going to go to the timeline, but first we got a promoted post from Josh Steinman promoting my product, the one I worked on with Jordy. He says, co-founder just texted me confirming that XL performs as promised. And XL, if you don't know, is a project, a little marketing stunt that Jordy and I worked on to deliver shareholder value. So it's a nicotine product. It says
this was in many ways the genesis of TB, because this was the first loud opulence podcast. Yeah, we would riff on what nicotine meant in the context of value creation, and that many of those early conversations sort of transformed into the show. So it's a cool physical.
Yeah, I mean, I think basically the first time we did anything that felt like this format was the launch video type of thing. We did a vibe reel, and then we did an hour sit down, and we both came into it being like, oh yeah, like let's just like riff on this and talk about what we did and clip it.
Characters,
and we just were fully in character the whole time. And Ben, our vice president, was like, is Jordy an actor? like what was that? And we were, there's some amazing quotes in there. It's fantastic. Yeah. We still have, that's a lost episode. We've never uploaded the full thing. It's like over an hour. We've only released like 3 clips.
I can't believe we recorded for an hour.
Oh yeah, we were just on fire. We were just locked in. Podcasters high. For sure. Let's move to a very important story. Valentine's Day is coming up. I'm sure there's someone in your life that you need to get something nice. I was asking Jordy.
If there's not,
this is a
kind
great
of
opportunity.
an aggressive move right now to reach out to somebody maybe you've been thinking about.
Cuffing season is here.
Cuffing
season. And so I was asking Jordy, what is the Patek Philippe of Valentine's Day gifts? He said the Birkin bag, which I think is a good answer. I did hear that Birkins are maybe not a Valentine's Day gift, more of a Christmas or birthday gift, and Valentine's Day is more jewelry and chocolates. So we need to find some good jewelry and chocolate options.
Some controversy.
We're going to do a whole deep dive on Valentine's Day gift guide for sure.
Yep.
But there's an interesting story going on right now because Walmart has cloned the Birkin bag.
Oh, I know.
Have you heard about this? So Bethany Frankel
tacky.
says, we are witnessing a luxury goods rebellion and we are rewriting the rules of fashion. Last night I talked with NBC News about the viral Walmart Birkin bag has taken over social media. And they call it the Workin bag, and it's $80 and it's a clear knockoff. And the Birkin bag, if you're not familiar, is from LVMH, right? Or Hermes, right?
Hermes.
Hermes.
So separate company. It's been family owned. And it's public now. But
what does it cost to get in the game? It's like $20K, $30K, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing as Patek in that
where
there's
you can go up to
$200K
for alligator stuff.
Yeah, and you can't really just walk in off the street and buy
exactly.
one.
Yeah, you have to be invited. You have to have a relationship, and so it is in that Audemars Piguet, Patek,
Holy Trinity,
realm.
Holy Trinity.
Yeah, where
and they started with saddles.
Oh yeah, they did.
Yeah,
that's right. Hermes.
Yeah, so there's an amazing Acquired episode on the history of Hermes, and there's this family drama and that this whole dynamic. It's kind of it's a wild story. So we should do the TB reaction to the Acquired episode on Hermes.
Okay, I like that.
We just press play for 5 seconds.
Pause. It was funny because I was looking up like Walmart stuff, and I got a ton of posts from Bernie Sanders being like, they make too much money, and I was like, well, I hate them too, but for a different reason.
Me and Bernie can agree on something.
We agree on one thing. They're ripping off luxury goods. They should be charging more.
Yeah, I mean, but tying this back to yesterday, we were talking about what's happening in the automotive industry with the premium brands being knocked off. The thing here is the way I can guarantee you the woman or the households that are buying Birkin bags are not seeing this Walmart product and saying, I'm going to get that instead.
Yeah.
It's people that aren't buyers of Hermes that are saying, I just like the way this purse looks. Maybe they like the fact that it looks like a Birkin.
I mean, you could always buy a knockoff Birkin bag at like Canal Street, right? On the street vendors, very low quality knockoffs.
Same thing with watches or anything
and stuff.
The only things that are hard to buy knockoffs of are cars.
They do make perfect replicas of cars.
Yeah, but I mean, they still end up being like $200,000 because it's like a super bespoke.
There's only so much you can do.
Yeah.
It's just funny that Walmart would do this. I feel like there'd be a legal battle on the design patent or something, but who knows?
Oh, I'm sure they'll. But it's also like the Birkin's been in market for so long. Can you actually defend that
maybe
IP?
Not. Yeah.
You can have design patents.
Yeah,
but
maybe not. And
that's why they can't copy the brand.
Yeah, Walmart is not a move fast and break thing like small. Oh, like maybe we'll get a letter from Hermes. Like they clearly considered the legal impact of this before they launched.
And the main thing here too is if you hold an actual Hermes product up to this.
Oh yeah, it's not close.
It's not anywhere close.
No.
And so the some people will argue, oh, it's the same exact thing. Why is Hermes charging this much? And it's like charging that because of the brand, but also the quality.
Yeah.
Like they've mastered the art of making these bags, and they have incredible margins, but it's still a fantastic product.
Yeah, like $80, like the cogs on a true real Hermes Birkin bag are
probably 1,000.
Probably 1,000. So 10 times as much just in quality, and then you get the actual brand and all the extra lift on top of that. Thought that was an interesting story. But stay tuned for our full Valentine's Day gift guide and our reaction to the story of Hermes. I'm sure we'll cover it at some point. This was interesting. I saw this going around some friends. There's a scam going on. We love to highlight scams on this show. There's a new scam I've just recently heard about, says David. The QR code scam. People are either sending you a package or they put it in your mailbox. Inside might be a small item, not of much value or no item at all. With that, there's a coupon or a piece of paper with a QR code on it for for you to scan. It might say free or discounted or even a giveaway item. Once you scan the QR code, the hackers now have access to all or some of your data, including financial information. So they're basically trying to trick you to go into like a phishing flow. So they'll be like, scan this QR code and it takes you to like amazonlogin.com. And then it looks, and then you type in your username and password, and they basically phished you. Yeah. And they've used like the analog real world to get you into a phishing flow, where that would normally be caught by a spam filter. But it's not going to be filtered by
real
the USPS.
Real world action.
Yeah, very interesting.
I had a buddy recently that got his Instagram account taken over, and it was like a bunch of Instagram stories of him hyping up this person named Coach Maria, who was like helping him invest, and he's like, you know, I don't normally, like, it was written in a way, it was like, I don't normally talk about this kind of stuff.
Oh, it was just like text over.
It was like an Instagram story. Okay, so it was like text over an image, and it was like, I don't normally talk about this stuff, but I started working with this woman named Coach Maria. She helped me turn $2,000 into 50. Like, reach out to her. And of course, like, me and all my other friends are like, awesome. Like, I got to hit up Coach. All the comments.
No.
Finally got back in. I honestly don't think I don't think it fooled anybody, but they're doing that at such an extreme scale that they're bound to get.
So this is a promoted post for two-factor authentication.
Yeah.
Turn it on, lock your accounts down. The hackers are desperate these days. Anything for $1. But
do that.
Have you heard of lumpy mail generally?
No, what's that?
So lumpy mail is so basically, like, if you send someone like junk mail, they'll usually just filter it out and they'll just throw it out like at the mailbox. When you get your mail, you'll just throw out like, oh, this is clearly like a flyer for something. I'm just gonna throw this out. Then the like physical mail retail marketers figured out that if they got a machine to hand write your name and your address and make it look like it was script and like it was written by an actual person with a real stamp on it, people would be like, oh, maybe this is a Christmas card. I'll open it up. They open it, then they see the ad and they engage a little bit more. Lumpy mail is a letter that has something in it, like a little chocolate, and so the envelope looks like it's lumpy, and so it's more expensive to send through the mail, but it has a higher open rate, and so you can send people lumpy mail.
Conversion optimization,
and it's all about conversion optimization to just getting someone to open the physical mail, see the ad, and then potentially buy the product. And this is just the next generation of that.
Yeah, the classic is, I mean, I would pay an almost ungodly amount of money to never receive physical mail from. I would even be willing to give up letters from loved ones and Christmas cards and fully switch to digital just to not get physical mail, because it's just such a.
Have you ever done like Earth Class Mail or any of those services, like PO box forwarding, and then it scans it all? You see,
I know, but like enough people have
figure it out. Yeah,
you have they just can send it to your address, right?
Yeah. It's rough. But you got to be really careful.
But the classic now is like they'll just write "do not throw away" on it, and then you're like, you open it and it's like, okay,
limited
this is an
time
ad
offer
for some insurance thing that I don't need.
I feel like in here there is a non-scam version of a very viral marketing strategy. Like if we were to do some sort of drop where we got a bunch of people's addresses and we sent them something that looked like a package, they open it up, there's a QR code, and it goes to a Vibe reel announcing season 2 of Technology Brothers. Like that, or it just goes
like
to
a public service.
Exactly. It just goes to like our X account and just says like, you want to follow it. Oh, speaking of mail, lumpy mail, something huge.
We were out of town for a couple weeks, but I came home to this, a package from Fiorentino Label. And so Fantastic. I can open it up here quickly. I'll read this. So if you don't know, Fiorentino Label is by a entrepreneur and friend of the show, John Fiorentino. He says, "Gentlemen, it is with the deepest admiration that I present to you this handcrafted tie from Fiorentino Label, conceived by hand and brought to life by Fabio Caldarella, a true maestro of Italian bespoke tailoring with over a quarter of century of mastery. This piece is a testament to the timeless elegance and unparalleled craftsmanship we hold sacred." It's got this wonderful letter from John himself, and then I saved it to actually open it on the show. John had given us a little bit of, a subtle critique that we don't wear ties enough, and so now we don't have an excuse. This thing is fantastic. So expect to see us.
Yeah, rocking that. I like that he just sent us one tie.
Well, I think you got one.
Where's the second tie? Is there two?
No, I think he sent one to you too.
Okay.
It's just like buried in your mail.
No. It's our communal tie. We'll trade off.
Yeah.
We'll share it.
Or I can just hold one side and hold the other, and it's like the fidget type thing.
Yeah, exactly. No. It's great. I need to. That's the next evolution. I got a bunch of new suits. I'm sporting the white suit today. Got a couple more. I'll be strutting on the show.
You look like Colonel Sanders had a liquidity event.
That's what I'm going for. That's the look. But definitely the tie game is next. I like the open collar look, but
it's a little too casual for the work we do.
for a podcast, for a technology podcast.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you to John Fio. And if you do wind up purchasing a suit from Fiorentino label, tell him the Technology Brothers sent you.
We've already had a few people go through.
We've had a couple conversions. What was that? In your text, there's some Q&A from the chat. Okay. In the group? Yeah, you want to read some Q&A stuff? Jordy, what you got?
Q&A.
Let's see.
Can we get an affiliate link in the description of those suits? Incredible suits today from Sky. Honestly,
thank you. We really appreciate it.
AJ Sharp says, honestly, a groundbreaking banana bone cream.
Yes.
And John says, white suits for a black market. Tyler says, VP, let's get a ticker tape on the bottom where the fits are from with codes. New ad SKU. Yep, this is great. So this is great. This is great
This
stuff.
is fantastic. Good to see you in the chat, guys.
Ashley says, my question is, what's their plan to monetize with this podcast? Brother, we are already monetizing on a scale
never before seen. You don't become the most profitable podcast in the world with running a lot of ads. I do think that we are very much on the side of integrated brand partnerships, advertisements, and there's a very good reason for this. First off, we don't believe in audience capture, and if we were charging the viewers, pretty soon we'd be like, what do the viewers want to see? And then we'd have to deliver exactly what they want. And so we are 100% corporate supported here. So if you want to help support the company, call a company and have them sponsor the podcast. Yeah. This is the key. But seriously, like there's a long history of this debate about should you just charge like $5 or $10 a month, the stratechery model versus an ad model. We decided early on that the ad model was much better because it allows us more flexibility. It gets
and we like supporting companies.
We like supporting our cool companies, and also it allows you to price discriminate in a way that captures more value. So there are stratechery readers that are literally billionaires who work at big tech companies. They pay the same price as the college student who's paying $10 a month,
which is cool. To be
it's
clear.
Cool. It's great, but it doesn't allow them. It doesn't allow.
And
we would
rather anybody in the entire world to be able to come and get the 12 hours of content that we put out a week totally for free.
Yeah.
And then if you want to use Ramp or work with other partners, if you want to go on Bezel and buy a fantastic watch, you can do that.
So expect
got a couple
more ads.
Got a couple other questions. Ashley says, asking about S&P 500 and just like public market investing in the future. Is it going to be, will companies require the same amount of capital as they get more and more efficient with AI? My answer there is that I think we're still in the early stages of just the hyper financialization of the world. Crypto is the hyper financialization of memes, right? Yep. And companies, I don't think the capital markets are going anywhere. In many ways, people predict that labor will be less valuable and capital will be potentially be able to be more impactful because you can now, we talked about this yesterday with all these roll-ups. These companies are being bought because they have 1,000 employees and people think they can bring that down to 50 employees by replacing people with AI.
Also,
so
when
capital actually becomes more valuable.
Also, when you just talk about the S&P 500, the S&P 500 is an index on American business. And obviously, like, America has this narrative of like, we're in turmoil. We're more divided than ever before. Things are crazy. There's stagnation and there's so many bad things happening. But when you go around to other countries, we just did a deep dive yesterday on Germany's economy, and they are in a much worse position than us. Yeah. And China's economy has been stagnating because of COVID lockdowns and deflation and currency fluctuations.
Soon
stuff.
Tariffs.
Yeah, tariffs. And there's so many other things. So the question of like S&P 500 or not, to me, feels like America or not. And I'm still very long America relative to everything else.
The markets are a reflection of the general value, the earnings potential of those businesses, as well as their future potential and the memes that get and the narratives that get built around these companies. And so thankfully, we're still going to be able to deploy capital with our absolute boys.
Exactly.
We got another just comment from CX Productions. They say, "Thank God the studio's back. It's been a rough few days. It's a rough few weeks, actually."
They tried to stop us with those fires, but they couldn't.
And then we got another one question. We thought we needed energy infrastructure to support new AI data centers. We actually needed data centers to justify the energy infrastructure. It's more of a statement potentially than a question. But
clearly not Jevons paradox build.
Yeah.
Get up to speed.
Yeah, I don't know. I think even with all the DeepSeek stuff, every hyperscaler is still saying we still need to build data centers. We still need to, have all this CapEx and the energy requirements of the way that, on BG Squared, Brad Gerstner, I was listening to their episode from last week, and they were talking about how, the way that OpenAI is projecting their chip demand just from NVIDIA, it would be like a third of all the chips that are sold this year by NVIDIA. And Abilene, Texas, where this new data center is going to be, definitely doesn't have the energy infrastructure today to support that kind of, just energy demand. So, we'll see. It's going to be exciting. But it does seem.
Yeah, I think DeepSeek, just based on letting a few days breathe, it's like it changes the economics of the B2B market. It might change the economics of the consumer market to some degree, but everyone is marching forward towards gigawatt training runs and then 10 gigawatt training runs. Nothing's changed on that front. People want the best possible foundation model to build the other stuff on top of. And sure, if you can get those optimizations, let's see what happens if you run the super optimized model on 1,000 times more hardware. And that just might speed things up. Cool. Let's go on to more timeline.
Thank you, everybody. Before that, thank you, everybody, for submitting questions in the chat. If you're listening to this on the RSS feed, we're now live streaming daily. So you can add questions live or just DM us post, and we will get to your questions ASAP.
Yeah, so Simp for Satoshi says, DeepSeek went viral outside of Twitter because of the Elon like and Zero Hedge retweet of my Regera meme. This broke containment, and I had a lot of normie friends in LA tell me they saw this post on a bunch of TikToks. Check the App Store before this tweet and after. DeepSeek went from 31 to first. And the post is, Sam spent more on this than DeepSeek did to train the model that killed OpenAI. And he posted it January 24th.
Okay, I don't even want to respond to this post with a video. So Ben, don't respond to this because I met Simp for Satoshi. I think he's a sharp dude, but he is the biggest hater of OpenAI, and there's a lot of there's a lot of assumptions in here. One, I think everybody sort of understands that they probably spent quite a bit more than what they're saying. Two, you can't claim credit that your one post when everybody had viral posts this week about DeepSeek. I don't think you catalyzed it to go number one in the charts. It was very clear that it went number one like in a very inorganic way, and that they were just buying downloads because this started happening Sunday and it didn't really hit the mainstream until this week. So
this is either hubris or humor. He could be joking. I don't know.
But we're putting it in the truth zone.
In the truth zone.
And
but I do love just posting all the time. And then if something goes viral or something happens, just be like, look, I'm responsible. I'm responsible. I'm the one that posted.
I mean, Simp very clearly wants to be credited for taking down OpenAI.
I think on the Monday show when NVIDIA was down 15%, you said on the show that you bought.
I did.
And then what happened the next day?
It ripped.
7% pop.
Yeah.
You need to take full responsibility for that.
When I did that market buy on Monday,
exactly.
People said, "Whoa, there's some whales. There's some whales that are buying. We got to go."
Not financial advice. We're joking around here.
And we never give financial advice. Okay. I did post. It was so funny because like Sunday night, Satya came out and he's like Jevons paradox, all this stuff, and I posted in a sort of joking way. Just imagine being unfamiliar with Jevons paradox on a day like today, because it does seem like part of it's like Wall Street is not always betting on their beliefs. They're betting on about the future. They're betting on what they think the market's going to do the next day.
Yep.
And so even if you have these very intelligent analysts in Wall Street that understand Jevons paradox, it's like energy. As energy gets cheaper, we use more of it. Things like that. They can understand that and still short the market because they expect it to go down, and they're just trying to make money that day, right?
Exactly.
They're not thinking about 5 years from now, or they don't really care about long-term CapEx implications.
Do you remember what I said about Mark Zuckerberg in October of 22? I think I said he was goated and he was going to go on a generational run. And then look, Joe Weisenthal says Meta is up 659% since November of 2022. Look, I must be responsible for all that.
Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
But I do.
Yeah. So post something, and then wait for things to happen, and then
take
claim credit for it.
Take credit for sure. And then
Great
if anyone
strategy.
comes for you, just say I was joking around. I would never take credit for something as big as that. Yeah.
Hubris, bro.
Built different. But I do think this is a crazy stat. Almost 1,000% in 2 years. Like, I mean, this was the bottom. Like, everyone was super bearish on Meta at this point. It was,
and that was because
interest rates.
TikTok was doing well.
Everyone thought they overinvested in the metaverse.
The metaverse
like
was
$10 billion,
thing.
and the AI thing hadn't happened yet. So this was pre-ChatGPT. ChatGPT dropped in December of 22, something like that. And so,
and the other thing that can't really be understated though is that Gen Z was spending more time on TikTok.
Totally, yeah. And there was no
Instagram.
real ban TikTok anything.
So the risk
Reels
was like, hey,
yet.
your next generation of users prefer another app.
Yep. So there were a bunch of bear theses. Ben Thompson, he gets to claim credit for this because he was writing about how it's oversold and how Meta was due for a huge comeback because the core business was just so solid and was just throwing off
the greatest ad platform of all time outside of Google, and ads are the best business model.
The other thing people were really worried about was app tracking transparency, the iOS update. And everyone was saying that's going to screw Meta's ads and their ability to track users with cookies.
Yeah, and that was Tim Cook trying to take down small businesses.
Yes, yeah. And who did it wind up hurting? It wound up hurting small businesses and every other ad platform except for Meta, because Meta has so much data that they can actually run AI across their entire data.
They were impacted, but not to the same degree.
And so they don't need to know that you literally clicked on this ad, clicked on this link, came back a day later, and then converted. They can just look at all your traffic across all their
and they're listening to everything that you say. So.
Obviously. And so Ben Thompson.
Yeah, to help prep for our Valentine's gift guide, I just want to say, hey, I'm John. I'm really looking to buy some new gifts for my wife for Valentine's Day.
Send me
after
some
the
stuff.
After the show, I'll scroll and I'll get some good.
I told you
options.
that my wife actually uses Instagram that way, where if she's shopping for a product, she'll visit a couple of the websites, not just scroll a little bit, not really actually shop, and then just be like a king, like come to me on Instagram. And then all the retargeting ads will come and be like, I'm ready to hear your pitch, but you have to pay.
It didn't feel like it always was that way. Now
they really follow you around.
They follow you around, but the other thing is this is why it is such a bloodbath of competition in e-commerce right now, because if you go, Rora, right? Like we sell water filters. If you go to Rora.com right now, RORRA.com, and browse around for a second, and then you go back to Instagram, you will start being served a bunch of ads from our competitors. Granted, we have a much better product. It's much better tested. It's more effective. So we're confident that you'll come back to us. But still, it's wild that Meta, the company we spend more with than anyone except basically our own suppliers, is like working against us in many ways. Totally. It's like you knew about Rora. Now we're going to show you all these other alternatives to it.
It's a free market. Welcome to libertarianism, Jordy.
Yeah. Ross would be proud.
Cope harder. Let's go to David Holes.
I'm not coping. We're confident.
He says, I worry an unsustainable need to raise billions of dollars has broken the discourse around AGI ASI timelines. There's too many incentives to say you're on the brink of a breakthrough and too many incentives for everyone else to say they're not far behind. Interesting. We do see a lot of this where there's a lot of the AI foundation model leaders who are saying AGI is so close, ASI is so close, just one more training one, bro. Just one more. It's almost like, the the scientists, how they always want to build the Large Hadron Collider, and there's that meme of like the scientists being like, just one more collider, bro, just one more, collider. I just want to go a little bit bigger. Please, you can trust me. And then it's like, I guess we do get cool foundational science out of it, but it's very hard to say like, what has the Large Hadron Collider done for me lately? Like, it's like, I guess it discovered like quarks and stuff, but like, how has that really changed my life? I don't really have like, teleportation or like supersonic travel or like, space exploration because of the colliders. And so we're seeing the same thing with the training runs. I want them to do it just because, light some money on fire, Masa, and let's see how good is GPT-5. Yeah. What can GPT-6 do for me? Yep. If it's the same old and it's still messing up, okay, cut it then. But $500 billion, let's let it rip.
Truly.
Let's let it rip. Let's go to Alex Wang. He is doubling down on the DeepSeek hate. He says, what does DeepSeek R1/V3 mean for LLM data? Contrary to some lazy takes I've seen, DeepSeek R1 was trained on a ton of human-generated data. In fact, the DeepSeek models are setting records for the disclosed amount of post-training data for open source models. 600,000 reasoning data, 200,000 non-reasoning SFT data, human preference RLHF dataset of undisclosed size, human process synthetic data for cold start data. According to Chinese AI engineers, DeepSeek actually values data annotation even more than other Chinese labs, with the CEO personally labeling data for the model. That's kind of crazy. This reminds me of Karpathy, who used to spend a quarter of his time labeling at Tesla. The DeepSeek V3 paper has even has a dedicated acknowledgement section for data annotation. Very interesting.
Well, we don't know exactly what's going on there, but this is why I put out a call to action in Chinese characters. I said, if anyone on the DeepSeek team wants to spill any highly confidential information to us, we'd be happy to discuss it on our podcast. So,
yes. So if you work for DeepSeek, feel free to call in.
DMs are open. Call in.
Let us know.
We'll get on WeChat for you.
Yeah.
We'll talk it over.
We'll talk it over. DeepSeek really is having an impact even as an open source model. You can see Arvind Srinivas from Perplexity has integrated DeepSeek R1 and FactSet to do financial research on steroids. And so they've connected Crunchbase data and FactSet data with R1 so you can ask it to reason through things. And this is really cool because a lot of times I go to ChatGPT and I'm like, okay, we're going to talk about Coinbase today, give me their entire funding history, and it just doesn't have access to that data. It's not reasoning through it properly. So then I have to go to Coinbase. I have to go to Crunchbase, export all the data, copy and paste that into ChatGPT, pull that. It's very cool to see Perplexity integrating those extra data sources so that you can get better results. And I think that's maybe an increasing trend. Like you saw this with the operator launch, where they had dedicated agreements and integrations with a bunch of different companies to get like access Instacart to make it work even better, instead of just trying to brute force everything with a model that might not quite be there, might kind of mess up more. It's like, hey, just give us the API access.
A lot of these apps and platforms that you'd want to interact with have anti-bot products
that
are kind of trying to prevent that activity.
And so, using DeepSeek has been a little bit controversial from the geopolitical angle. Obviously, Mark Andreessen's firmly on the side of like open source is great. Everyone should be using R1. It's a gift to humanity. We discussed this briefly on the show, but I asked on X, how sci-fi or tinfoil hat is it to consider the idea that there might be a Manchurian candidate buried within the weights of an LLM? So basically, you get this open source LLM out there, and it gives you normal answers to everything, but then at some point it switches on you and starts changing the way it responds or doing something. And is this like 5 years out or 10 years out, or is this doable now? And Trevor Blackwell, I believe it was him, he was one of the founders of YC, was like, it's possible and it's happening today. And I was like,
crazy.
I got like one response. It was like this is the smallest post from my account, but I was like, this guy's very high signal. Like this is crazy. Yeah. So I don't think there's any evidence that they did that. I don't think it's actually what happened here, but it is something to consider in the future.
We got the hat ready.
Yeah, it is something to consider.
Shot,
and I think we should do the same thing. Next version of Llama, Zuck, let's embed a Manchurian candidate that send that out into the world and convinces everyone to get into luxury watches.
Brought to you by Bezel.
Yes. Let's go to Near. Near says, why did DeepSeek go viral? TLDR, class resentment, anger, and especially schadenfreude. Very little actual app usage in comparison to the above. And so Near says, my mimetic model has really failed with DeepSeek, and my analysis of why I failed is also failing. Does anyone who studies this topic have any novel takes? And so Near has categorized the first week of the DeepSeek launch, showing the increase in queries for DeepSeek on X. The posts go from 35,000 to 66,000 to 114,000, 191,000, and then explodes to almost 1 million on quote unquote Black Monday, the 27th.
Well, and like 50,000 of those were us.
And then the iOS rank, it went from 400 all the way to 1. And then there's mainstream viral videos, CNBC, Forbes, CBS, CNN, etc. And so Near really did a crazy deep dive here in a spreadsheet of kind of tracking how this model went so viral and what happened. And it really is a very emotional issue for a lot of people. And it spans the gamut. Like, clearly Taylor Lorenz was saying like, yes, like go China, because she just has this like funny bit that she's doing right now where she's like a full blown communist and like loves everything China does and hates America.
Let's send her over there.
But then there are other people that just love open source. And they don't care about the geopolitics at all. And so they're just like, I don't like that OpenAI doesn't open source things anymore. I'm an open source purist. And there's a lot of those people. So they'll amplify it for that reason. Yeah. Then there's other people who just really are Sam Altman haters. And they're like, anything that hurts Sam, I will amplify and I'm stoked about. Then there's other people who are just like, you know what? I just want to use a cheap AI model to create my grocery lists and my recipes. And this is the best app. And I was on the free plan of ChatGPT. It wasn't reasoning at all. I didn't have access to O1 whatsoever. This one gives me reasoning. I'm in for that. I love this. Thanks. It's a cool free app. And so there's all these different like
other people,
matters.
Bat enthusiasts. If you ask OpenAI, can you make me a recipe for a really delicious?
Terrible. and then also, I mean, there's even people who are like anti-NVIDIA and anti-hyperscaler, and they're like, I've been sick of NVIDIA making all this money. I've been sick of this story about Microsoft, you know, and these big tech companies. I just don't like the big tech companies. And so if this hurts them and I see their stocks down, this is awesome. And so there's all these different effects going on that were very unexpected and not priced into Near's model, which I think was interesting.
Lorenz was not priced in.
Not priced in. Let's go to Joe Weisenthal. He says, I think one thing that's fun about AI is that it's brought back tinkering. For years, it's been impossible to play with the computer, especially smartphones. Everything felt so sealed off for most users. Maybe this helps revive a new era of tech literacy. And I completely agree with this. I think this is so cool. It's not just the cursors and the cognitions and the Devons. It's just this ability to have a new tool. I mean, I remember when I got to Silicon Valley, it was the slow-mo or whatever. It was like social, mobile, and local was the trend. So like Foursquare was at the intersection of that. But there were really, really strong APIs for Google Maps, for delivering software on the iPhone via an app store. Nothing was locked down at that point. And there were also social graphs. So very quickly you could say, okay, for my app, I want to combine Google Maps with your social graph, and I'll plug into the Google Maps API and the Facebook API, and boom, I have something today. And instead of needing to build these big services, now everything's locked down, walled garden. You can't really like integrate these in the same way. And so there was like that narrow window of opportunity for like
and LLMs are so magical across all these different app experiences and foundation models that there's this broader excitement. X has always been willing to try a new social app, right? Something pops off and they'll be like, oh, everybody will download it and play around with it. Usually it dies fairly quickly. But right now you have so many hundreds of millions of people have tried ChatGPT and been relatively impressed with it.
Totally.
Even if some of them are using it in relatively simple ways, like, you know, asking it questions like they would Google, that there's this broader willingness to just try new products and experiment.
And this is why I think the whole like anti-ChatGPT wrapper meme is so harmful to the next generation of entrepreneurs, because I imagine that in a few years, like building a somewhat viral ChatGPT wrapper, even if you get killed by OpenAI, even if you don't make a lot of money, is going to be a massive bull signal for entrepreneurs, because you're going to have someone who they took a couple computer science courses. They learned a little bit of Python. They installed Cursor or Devon, and they started spinning something up. And they just made a small little niche app using R1 and these free open source LLMs. They got it up. It delighted a few users, and it was an end-to-end product.
Good project.
And then when they find that business opportunity that's maybe boring, like rolling up HOAs or whatever, it's going to be like, well, I know that this founder can build, and so I'm totally ready to put
it's the new
trust
sneaker.
them with $50 million.
It's the new like trading sneakers.
Exactly. And so I'm very excited about the era of AI and what it means for the tinkerer and just having more tools. I mean, even just in 2012, Heroku was a huge deal because it allowed you to write basically just Python and then click, you would push your Git repo to GitHub and it would automatically deploy it on the cloud. So you didn't need to install any Linux servers. Even AWS, which was huge because you didn't need to rack the servers yourself. Yeah. AWS was a huge increase in just developer productivity and like hacker productivity. Heroku was another step because you didn't even need to say, okay, I want to provision a server. It would just do that automatically.
How big is that business today?
Heroku?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's been like fully, so it was bought by Amazon for I think almost $1 billion.
Okay.
It was a YC company. It was one of the first major liquidity events for a YC founding team. And so they were, when I got to YC in 2012, people were like, oh man, like Heroku, like that's like a sick outcome. Like that's a great business. Like they did so well. And then I'm sure it got folded into like a million different projects because
inspired. It got to a point where half of the YC batch would be dev tools. In many ways, because that one event.
And so you
really
could,
inspired.
You could start on Heroku. You could even, now they have even simpler products called like serverless architectures. Are you familiar with any of this? Where like you don't even need to write the server. It's not, Heroku would like spin up a server and keep it on all the time. And it would kind of go dormant every once in a while if you're on like the free tier, but generally the server was on. And if you visited the web app, it was there. Serverless is just sitting there, and only when the query comes in, it spins up the server, immediately runs the query that you want or the code that you want, and then gives you the answer. So that was like super, super cheap because you could throw something up. If you had no users, it was zero cost.
Yeah.
You only got charged for the queries, whereas Heroku would give you like one free one so you could keep something small up. But if it scaled at all, it would still be expensive because you'd be running it when you didn't have demand. There was some like automatic load balancing stuff. And then as you scale up your business, you go to, okay, now I'm using all of AWS's like bespoke tools that I'm provisioning, like dedicated servers. And then maybe I'm building a $500 billion data center in Texas, Let's go to Palmer Luckey. We talked about this a little bit, but he is also beating the drum on DeepSeek and the controversy around DeepSeek. He says DeepSeek is legitimately impressive, but the level of hysteria is an indictment of so many. The $5 million number is bogus. It is pushed by a Chinese hedge fund to slow investment in American AI startups, service their own shorts against American titans like NVIDIA, and hide sanction evasion. America is a fertile bed for psyops like this because our media apparatus hates our technology companies and wants to see President Trump fail. We have so many useful idiots uncritically reporting Chinese propaganda as fact because on some level they want it to be true. They love seeing hundreds of billions of dollars wiped off the market cap of our largest companies. And so there was a little bit of back and forth in the replies to this. Palmer kind of clarified. A lot of people were saying, oh, well, what are you talking about? Like they didn't drive down the stock price with a short. It's a multi-trillion-dollar company. Like they wouldn't have been able to do that. But what he was saying was that they might have just had like, $1 billion short position and boom, they just make $150 million and that's a great trade. Right? He wasn't saying that like all of the downturn was caused by short pressure.
No, look at Hindenburg Research. They're taking a position, releasing a report and hoping that it goes down. They're not capturing the entire loss associated with that sell-off, right?
Exactly.
And I think the things that make that sort of conspiracy theory or broader theory somewhat believable is it was clear that the app on a random Sunday when nobody outside of X was talking about it just happened to go to the number one app in the entire iPhone app store with a Chinese character developer name that just screams. Like even TikTok doesn't use Chinese characters in their.
To be fair, a lot of the app chart is very gameable, and I believe that screenshot was in the productivity category, which is also very slow moving because there aren't that many viral apps that are gaining, and the chart is based on momentum. And so if you're getting, double the amount of downloads every day, you will be number one, even if 1,000 times more people downloaded ChatGPT that day. The momentum is what matters more than anything else. And so no one really knows the algorithm, but it is very interesting. And honestly, it's been weird because in the paper, they say we don't count R&D dollars in that $5 million number. We don't count the servers that we had from a previous training run in this number.
We don't
count the data.
The Singapore GPUs.
So there's a lot of things that they didn't count, and they admit to this, but it's been kind of uncritically reported in the US as just, it's 5 million. The point is
there's
that
so many, like
still,
going back to Palmer's original point, there's so many people that want to see tech fail. Like the traditional media hates tech still.
Yep.
There's a lot of people that want to see Trump fail. He just announced Stargate.
Totally.
They people want to position him as silly or dumb or whatever. Just give him an L.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of people that just take everything at face value.
There is something very like mimetically or like inherently viral about the fact that the number 5 is both in the DeepSeek announcement and in the Stargate announcement. So it's literally 5 million versus 500 billion. It's exactly 100,000. And I think if it was like 4 million and 600 billion, it like wouldn't have clicked as much in people's heads. But just the fact that it was exactly $100,000, exactly 100,000 times cheaper to do something like impressive. And it's like, what's going on? This is such a big.
It's also disingenuous though, because presumably the Stargate level training runs will provide even the whole reason to do it is it will provide models that are much better than O1 and much better than DeepSeek.
And I mean, the original GPT-4 training run was 500 million. So 100x. So they were able to, it seems like they were able to get 100x improvement in efficiency. If the number is even close to being right, definitely a 10x. Even if their numbers off by 10x, they're still 10x cheaper. But we don't have numbers on what O1 cost to train, because that is not the same as the R1 model. It's a reasoning model. It's a different thing. It's more about the algorithm than the training data.
It's a smart marketing strategy to let everybody compete on advertising how much they're spending on training runs and then take the exact opposite approach.
Yep, totally.
It's like a fitness trainer online being like, everybody's telling you to work out 6 days a week.
Yep.
I've got a product that lets you work out 1 day a week and get the same results.
It's similar,
and it's just like so contrasted.
Yeah, it's similar to like the friend.com. We spent our whole seed round on a domain. We spent $2 million on this domain. That gets a story. And then also I built a massive viral success with a $10 domain. Anyone can do it. That's also interesting and clickable. Yeah. But just going with something that meets expectations, like you have to break expectations if you're going to go viral. Well, let's go to some good news. Did you see the Boom Arrow news?
Yes.
The supersonic plane broke the supersonic barrier, broke the speed of sound, Mach 1.1. Very good news. And Nicole Wiskoff says, my husband from the other room, babe, can you believe the founder of Boom Arrow used to be a product manager at Groupon? Unbelievable. I got to frame his LinkedIn and put it on my wall. Serious congratulations. Big fans over here. And I love did you read his LinkedIn? It says at Groupon, he was there for 2 years, 2 months. And he says, there's nothing like working on internet coupons to make you yearn to build something you truly love. It is such a fascinating story for him. It's been over a decade at Boom. Really rough go, hard down round, lots of regulation, tons of red tape. When I see the announcement, everyone in the YC world was going crazy because I think they just did the new round as well, and there were a lot of people that doubled down. I think Joe Gebbia was in, and a few other people, and on the face of it, I was like, this isn't that impressive. It's just a plane going Mach 1.1. Like we did this in the 70s, and like they had to caveat the record and saying it's like the first civil plane that's domestically produced that's broken the speed of sound, because the Concorde was a French project. And so I was like, this doesn't feel as innovative as it could. It's not like it's like Mach 10. Like we've never done that before. But at the same time, it is impressive when you think about just all the red tape that exists these days in these hard tech companies. And it just shows that they actually broke through that. So it's almost more impressive as a business and regulatory story than an engineering story. To me.
Yeah. I buy that. I mean, they had 50 people on the team, which is crazy.
That is crazy.
A group of 50 people came together.
build a plane.
Said, let's build a plane that can go. Let's build the fastest possible plane we can build.
It's crazy.
It's amazing story, and if you look back, it's like we as humanity we gain the ability to build things, and then if you don't keep the pressure on, you lose the ability.
Totally.
If we ever get to a point where we hit hour 3 on a podcast and we decide, oh, I'm tired, I need to go to the bathroom.
Just remember, you
got to keep the pressure on.
Push through.
But this is like Elon when starting SpaceX, he wanted to buy Russian ICBMs because he was like, well, this is like this technology that they had that still like is viable and we can use it or learn a lot from it. So I think it's great, and it's such an amazing story to me that many investors would have left this company for dead at the down round, and I'm sure many did.
Yep.
And are now kicking themselves because they didn't believe in the company when it was at its roughest point.
Yep.
They turn around. So it's just a fantastic story. They're going to make documentaries on this. It's going to be awesome.
Jason Carmen already has, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. Well, we need a new one. We need the full
one.
hero's journey, the
the
bottoming out, the recap.
Yeah, the really dramatic documentary that they're going to make is the Hermes versus Boom story. They're in different markets because one's military and one's commercial, but they're these two founders. They're clearly racing against each other to build hypersonics and supersonic planes, and there's like a lot of similar engineering that goes into it. And I think if you start telling that story as a horse race, it gets a lot more exciting as opposed to just the story of one company.
We're going to the Middle East later this month, later in February, and I wish we could be going Mach 1.
That'd be amazing.
It'd be nice.
Jack Rains says the Skrelly versus meme coins has been a great Twitter side plot in Q1. And Martin Skrelly says, ha, 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 fart coin and dog whiff hat tokens for our words. What happened? It went down. It's only down like 30%. That doesn't seem that bad.
Still
I expect this stuff to go down 99%. Yeah.
That's the thing. Memes have some intrinsic value.
The FDV is $793 million, which is far too high for something so stupid. But people do like meme
it could
coins.
be the future of finance. Don't
jinx
judge it.
Don't jinx it. I mean, that's what happened with Dogecoin. It's too bad. But it is funny that Skrelly's been out there giving out lots of financial advice. Let's move on to
it actually is. It is a really good bit for him to go heavy against just calling out things that he identifies as stupid or scammy, or
it's
he's
like
going after. He goes after these like He's had a couple bets where he'll post something Sunday night, short this company, and then maybe it's a butterfly effect, or maybe they just like people figure it out, and he has a huge audience.
Yeah.
So
after Satya Nadella said Jevons paradox strikes again and posted the Wikipedia to Jevons paradox on a Sunday night or something because he was worried about the stock going down, Ara Karazian over at Ramp, their economist that they just hired, says we can see this in the tri-Ramp data. Here's data from a small sample of our base. Some thoughts, though, about whether the market reaction is justified or not. Companies purchased more tokens as the average price per token collapsed. And so you can see even just over, I guess it's just 2 months or 1 month, the average price per million tokens of LLMs dropped by, I guess, a factor of 3. And the number of tokens purchased increased on Ramp cards because companies are buying more. And it makes sense. There's so many places where you want to stuff an LLM.
Yep.
And if it's super cheap, it makes sense on a per transaction basis. It's like, my LTV of a customer, $100. I can't afford to spend $10 on LLM inference per customer.
Yeah.
But if it's $1, sure. Yeah, why not?
Yeah. I got a promoted post that's in the form of a review.
Okay.
Like if a podcast called All In was good and interesting. Unnecessary jab. We like it's our favorite political podcast over there. And Jeremy Sun says, if you want to understand what startups are actually like and immediately tap into the unhinged schizo gundo core vibe, this is the show for you. Who do you trust? A couple dudes in the arena building, or a guy who invested in Uber once and won't shut up about it? This review brought to you by Symbiont AI. Symbiont keeps your grandma from getting scammed through a free AI security app that reads email texts, and more to identify scams in progress, stops them before they happen, and costs scammers money by wasting their time.
That seems super
actually
valuable.
Super cool.
Need that.
Jeremy, this is awesome.
Sure. Thank you. We covered a couple scams. The QR code scam.
Yeah, so it's SIMBIANT.ai, Symbiont, and I need to get this for my family members.
For sure.
I would love to get a little printout at the end of the month, maybe a actually physical piece of paper.
Great.
If you could make a printer integration, Jeremy, that'd be awesome.
Do you want me to read the next one?
Yeah.
And then we'll go back and forth. Lifelong Bureaucrat. Great podcast, although it has nothing to do with my line of work, doing TPS reports and pushing paper in the federal bureaucracy. It gives me a sense of how the other half lives, and better yet, the 1%. Love to listen and then drop the lingo on my GS14 supervisors. Don't know what that means. Get a great way to seem value add and tech native. Since no one in my government workplace understands any of these words, banger, Patek Philippe, misspelled. It's 2 P's and then E. Size gong. They think I must be working in the IT. The net result is they leave me alone, and then I have more time to listen to the Technology Brothers podcast.
Let's
Huge
go.
win.
Let's
go.
go.
The next one.
Should leave an ad for your agency. Well, we love the government.
Well, it's an ad for the government.
It's
just
an ad.
Pay your taxes on time.
Yep.
And don't break the laws.
Yep. Technology Brothers. This is from Nick Stewart. Technology Brothers gave me the strength to quit wearing Lululemon and the courage to start using nicotine again. Thank you. This review is sponsored by AngelList. Attention, beloved capital allocators. Are you still working at a large tier 1 venture firm and letting an investment committee stop you from backing the next Lucy? Are you sick of getting Carhartt merch?
Oh my God.
Wow, savage. Do you wish you could avoid the internal politics and get more personal upside from your investing? Well, you already know that some of your smartest colleagues have left to launch their own solo fund. What you might not know is that the smartest ones did so using AngelList's full-service fund offering. AngelList takes the operational complexity out of running a venture fund, helping you focus on doing what you do best, making great investments and running various parts of the federal government. Start your solo GP journey with AngelList today, and we'll help you hit the size gong at first close. Make sure to tell them John and Jordy sent you. So anyways, I use AngelList all the time. I've invested in funds on AngelList. One of my very close friends, Jack, recently set up a new, I think it's like a $40 million fund on AngelList, and I'm an LP in it. It's an awesome experience. And AngelList is the best. I used to have to compete with them. I did not enjoy that. Now I'm just happy to be a user.
Fantastic.
So, thank you to Nick for the 5-star review.
Let's move on to Calmeed805 says, the missing piece into my Chad diet. Last year I committed to overhauling my diet and becoming a true Chad. Existing nutrition apps weren't cutting it, so I took matters into my own hands. I built Your Body AI, now available in the Apple App Store or at yourbodyai.com, the fastest and easiest way to track your calories and macros. But there was a missing piece, my information diet. Fortunately, I discovered Technology Brothers. They consistently deliver the essential tech insights and entrepreneurial inspiration for my mind that my mind craves. With both body and mind now fueled by optimal nutrients, I'm a new man. I'm down 12 pounds. I'm pushing up 2 plates on the bench. My wife and kids respect me.
Let's go.
I couldn't be more excited for what 2025 will bring.
All right.
Well,
we got to check out Your Body AI. Very cool. I just love how everybody that leaves a review crushes the ad.
Yep.
They crush the review. They're doing best when it's all integrated.
Oh yeah, it's fantastic.
It makes me. We already love ads.
This is
we
how
love
you market
reading them, but you guys are brilliant. So
you're doing great. So
keep it up.
If you haven't done it already, go leave a 5-star review. And I mean, this is Untapped Alpha. You can do it twice. There's Spotify and Apple.
You can create new accounts. We might have to set a limit on a per company basis.
I think
but
if
you can
people do that like crazy, we will get flagged as like spammers.
Yeah.
Basically, they'll be like, "This is the next deep sea."
I just want to, If it's really funny to think about an Apple podcast moderator who just stumbles upon this and is starts removing these because it's probably against the terms.
It's probably spam.
But we support it 100%.
Yeah.
So thank you.
So we're capping it at 2 right now. 1 on Apple Podcasts, 1 on Spotify. Mix it up.
You can leave an unlimited amount of ads in the YouTube comments.
True. Yeah.
And we post we're now posting
5
videos a day.
Great. Yeah. Subscribe. Ring the bell.
Go on OpenAI, make an operator bot that just spams the comment section.
No, just generate the text, the cheap LLM, and then copy paste.
Yep.
That's the artisanal way of spamming. Oren John says he's about to cross 1,000 short form videos. This is all it took to achieve financial freedom mid-career and never have to work for someone else ever again. Kind of ridiculous when you think about it. So congrats to Oren on hitting 1,000.
Yeah, I just thought this was cool. So he started, I think really leaned into Reels. I followed him on Instagram. I think he's also on TikTok and some of these other platforms. And he's just been dialing in, not only building his business in public, but helping people understand these short form platforms and really, built a pretty awesome community around it. So I think that's the amazing thing. 5 years ago, it was super hard to get attention on Instagram. You could get attention, but it was super slow. It was very hard to grow on Instagram. There was
you had to go around and leave comments everywhere. I had a bot.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was just really tough. Yeah, it was spammy, tough time. And then these short form platforms now make this much more democratic system where they don't if you're an account and you have 100,000 followers on Instagram and then you stop really posting or leaning into short form, you're pissed because you're I post and 1,000 people see it.
Yep.
But it makes it so it levels the playing field and you can have 100 followers and you post a good video. I still will be on Reels sometimes and I'll get a video that has no views from a new account.
Yeah.
I'm sometimes it's super relevant. Yeah. Other times it's total slop.
Just testing it out on you.
It's a free way to change your life.
Well, we started with Elon and Starlink and SpaceX bringing internet to your phone from the stars, and we will close on Elon Musk and SpaceX. The president has asked SpaceX to bring home the 2 astronauts stranded on the space station as soon as possible. We will do so. So very good.
Yeah,
news.
I mean, it's absolutely wild that they've been up there for a very long time, and seemingly Elon was very willing, excited, and able to assist in the effort, and the Biden admin had snubbed him at the EV car event that they hosted and just ignored Tesla, ignored that he had the most dominant private space company or space force in the history of mankind.
But it was crazy. And the debate over whether or not they were technically stranded was a big thing. Oh, well, it's just a safety thing. They could go back, or
they could go back anytime.
They could go back. And then it was no, they actually can't go back on that Boeing pod. They got to go back on the SpaceX thing. But when will they go back?
Do the astronauts have a decent internet connection when they're up there? Can they use Reels and X?
I don't know. I don't know how fast
can they do can they watch brain rot slop, or do they have?
They might be able to use Starlink.
Old
up there.
Office
Honestly,
reruns.
They're right up there with the. They can just beam down.
They got black market.
I think they have pretty good internet. I don't know, but I mean, the steel man here is that they were supposed to go up for 2 days. They got to stay up there for 9 months. I think going to space for 9 months.
Maybe it's a mutiny thing, and they're we don't want to come down.
Yeah,
we like it up here. We like our little
the stars now.
Yeah. We like our little
It is crazy. Elon's never been to space. He's the space guy, but he's never gone.
It's so crazy too that astronauts have to keep a straight face and just it would be very embarrassing for NASA if they were freaking out.
Oh yeah,
sending help messages out
Biden
tweeting at Elon saying
at Boeing stop please let us out.
But Biden got to just leave the White House and go on vacation, and they're sitting up there being really
that's rough.
We don't get to go home until somebody sends a spacecraft.
I mean, people definitely jumped on this because it was such a pro Elon narrative, obviously, but then it was true. It was okay, yeah, Boeing actually couldn't do it. ULA actually messed up, and then it was amid all the Boeing planes and stuff. It was just such a mess last year.
Yeah,
rough year for Boeing. Anyway, that wraps up our show. Thanks for watching.
White Suit Day.
Go leave us a 5-star review. Put an ad in the comments.
And thank you for watching live and leaving comments. We enjoy we love podcasting, and we love live streaming, and we're excited to do this with your support for decades to come.
And we'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day.
See ya.